Chapter 741. Juan hid in the side hall and read the memorial over and over again. She savored every single word. Her tears of joy were like pearls from a broken necklace, falling down with a pitter-patter. After such a long time of concern, longing, and worry, she had finally gotten the result she wanted. She did not want to cry, but she could not hold back her tears. He was still alive. He was still alive. Shouts of joy rang out from the bottom of her heart. Then she began to guess at Yang Fan's situation through the short content between the lines. Ever since the Battle of Huangguodir ended, he had been captured. He must have suffered a lot in these days. His leg had been hit by an arrow. She did not know if the wound had healed. He had heard from the Khitan that the Khitan wanted to form an alliance with the Turks. He had spent so much effort to escape deep in the mountains. It must have been very dangerous. Those Khitans, with only tens of thousands of people, had defeated the imperial court's army of more than 100,000 twice, and each time they had won a complete victory. Even so many great generals had not been able to escape, so each of them must be like fiends. How difficult would it be for Lang Jun to escape from their hands? Wan Er's thoughts ran wild. After a long time, she finally controlled her joyful heart. She gently wiped away her tears and hid away the thread of longing that she could not cut off. She walked out of the side hall. Sister Wan Er. Fu Qingqing stood up. She was surprised to find that Wan Er seemed to be different. She could not say what was different, but she seemed to be different. She was like a blade of grass that had been dry for a long time. Suddenly, it was full of water and once again stood up with its slender, beautiful and weak body. I am going to see His Majesty. There is an important military report. Wan Er said sternly to Fu Qingqing with a stern face. After Wan Er finished speaking, she quickly walked out of the hall. Her shoulders did not move, and her dress did not sway. She was like the clouds and flowing water. She was still elegant, but she was less calm than before. She had to walk very fast. Otherwise, she would not be able to hold back the smile on her lips and the smile that came from her heart. On the lovely spring stage, Wu Zetian's face was gloomy. She was in a very bad mood. So much so that even Zhang Changzong and Zhang Yiji's flattery couldn't make her smile. Right now, the second Zhang had also quietly left out of fear, hearing that the Turks were also taking advantage of the chaos in the Khitans to plunder and plunder as they pleased in Hebei, even going so far as to declare that they were attacking the Zhou in place of the Tang. Wu Zetian, who had just formed a marriage alliance with the Turks, felt like she had been struck by a blow to the head. She was enraged. Disregarding the consequences, she mobilized troops from the western regions, from the southern frontier, and from the prefectural armies in various regions. She assembled a large army and charged toward Hebei. The crafty Turks retreated. In the great desert plains, the empire couldn't afford to drag things out. That despairing pursuit was enough to drag the empire into the abyss of collapse, but were they just going to let them come and go like this? Wu Zetian found it hard to swallow this anger. However, that shameless Moshe didn't care about what she thought. When he retreated because he didn't have the time to take all those slaves with him, he killed all the tens of thousands of men and women he had plundered from Zhaozhou and Dingzhou. Even so, this shameless man sent people to court and, in a serious manner, suggested that the reason they had attacked Hebei was because the imperial court hadn't agreed to all of their conditions. As long as the imperial court agreed to cede the Chanyu Protector General and return the surrendered territories of the Heku 6 provinces, not only would they not attack Zhou, they would also be willing to cooperate with Wuzhou in attacking the Khitans. Wu Zetian knew that they were talking nonsense, but the situation was stronger than the people. Did Wu Zhou have the strength to fight on both sides? Now that Moshe had 400,000 soldiers and occupied tens of thousands of li of land, most of the tribes in the northwest feared his power and abandoned Wuzhou to submit to the Turks. What could the imperial court do to this powerful scoundrel? Sage, Li Duozhua has an urgent report. Shanghai Wan. or quickly walked into the lovely spring stage. Wu Zetian, who had been lying tiredly on the chair, sat up in shock and urgently asked, "What happened in Hebei?" "Your Majesty, please take a look." Shanghai Wan handed the report to Wu Zetian. Wu Zetian took the report and struggled to read a few lines. She shook her head and said, "Read it to me." Yes. Wan took the report and read the information Yang Fan had gathered to Wu Zetian. When Wu Zetian finished listening, she completely forgot that Yang Fan was her daughter's lover. She also forgot that he had contributed greatly to her in the western regions. Not to mention other things, just his plan to sow discord in Tubo had borne fruit today. If it wasn't for the Tubo's internal struggle for power and the fierce fighting, Tubo would not be so peaceful today, and Wuzhou would be in an even more difficult situation. She only paid attention to the news that the Kaitins wanted to form an alliance with the Turks. If this news was true, once the Turks and the Kaitins worked together, wouldn't the chaos in Hebei be pacified indefinitely? Wu Zetian weakly lay back on the chair and closed her eyes in pain. "Don't tell me. I have to agree to the Turks' conditions? Returning the surrendered tribes is not as simple as returning the surrendered tribes. Once these surrendered tribes are returned to the Turks, will the other tribes still be willing to submit to Wuzhou? Don't tell me I have to give the Chanyu protectorate to the Turks? Since ancient times, has there ever been a king who did not expand his territory but ceded it? What should I do? What should I do?" When the Turks heard the news that Wuzhou was sending troops to Hebei, they quickly retreated back to their territory. Although they retreated in a hurry and did not bring the male and female slaves with them, they still plundered a large amount of wealth. Those carts of goods were as good as raiding a Han's house. There was nothing they did not rob. Great Khan, the current Tang dynasty, is no longer the Tang dynasty of the past. Even the Kaitins with just a few tens of thousands can cause such a huge storm. The Great Khan controls 400,000. What is there to be afraid of? Why retreat so hastily? A Turk general who came to receive the troops saw the big and small bags and the riches on the carts and horses. He could not help but be pleasantly surprised. Thinking that the Khan had given up on so much wealth, he could not help but grumble to him. Moshe smiled slyly. "Fool, you're only staring at the little prophet in front of you. You need to look further. That's right, the Tang dynasty is indeed defeated. But a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. We can bully this colossus once in a while, but to swallow it whole, we don't have that big of an appetite. If we fight with the Tang dynasty and both sides suffer heavy losses, even if the Tang dynasty falls, our strength will be depleted. At that time, do you think that the Hueha and Tubo will let go of the chance to swallow us up? Friends are only temporary." Moshe stroked his beard and smiled. Pleased with himself, he said, "Now we need to strengthen ourselves as much as possible. We need to strengthen ourselves without hurting our strength. We can't swallow the Tang dynasty right now, but we can still swallow a small chitin. If we fight to the death with the Tang dynasty now, the Kaitins will also take the chance to rise. This little brother is also a nomad like us. The grasslands are also connected. It is not a good thing to let it grow stronger." That general came to a sudden realization and said, "I understand. The Khan is saying that we should watch the Tang dynasty and the Kaitins fight to the death. When the Kaitins fall, the Tang dynasty will also be greatly weakened. At that time, we can swallow the Kaitins without any effort and strengthen ourselves." Moshe laughed and lightly tapped the general's shoulder with his horsewhip. "You are finally a little smarter. When the Kaitins are defeated, we will swallow the Kaitins' population and territory. At that time, we will swallow the Shi tribe and Lao Ai. Once the entire desert grasslands are united, we can march south. Isn't that better? The Great Khan is wise." Ha 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 ha! On the lovely spring stage, Wu Zetian stood up with difficulty. Wan hurried forward to help her. Wu Zetian stubbornly shook off her hand and grabbed her dragon-headed walking stick. She took a few steps forward and stood still. Panting, she said, "Wanner, send an order to the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Let them negotiate with the Turks. I agree to return the 6 surrendered states. But the Chanyu Protectorate will not budge. I have already abandoned the people. I cannot give up land and be cursed by the world. If Moshe doesn't give up, then let him come and take it himself. If he can take it, it will be his." Wu Zetian laughed coldly. "Go, tell the Chamberlain of Dependencies this. If they agree, then they will send troops to assist the imperial court in suppressing the Khitans, and we will no longer pursue his crime of attacking Hebei. Otherwise, at worst, we will fight. Who wins and who loses, who dies and who lives, is still unknown." Wanner hurriedly bowed. "Yes, Wanner will go now." "Wait." Wu Zetian thought for a moment and said, "Wu Izong, Lu Shirda, and Shatsomi have already led their troops to Hebei." "Yes. Send an order to that idiot Wu Yi to immediately lead his troops out of the city. He will coordinate with Wu Izong in the north and south. He will take the initiative to fight the enemy. If he dares to hide in the city again, I will not let him off lightly. Yes. Send another order to Zhejiang's King Wu Yi to the east of Luoyang and fortify the capital's defenses. Yes. Send an order to the Heilong Kingdom to appoint Di Renjie as the ambassador of Hebei. He is to quickly set out and pacify Hebei. Send an order to the Ministry of War to set up cavalry units to the north and south of the Yellow River. Assistant Minister of the Phoenix Pavilion, Wei Yuanzhong, will be the head of Bingzhou and the chief commander of the Heavenly Army. We will repel the Khitans in the north and the Turks in the west." "Yes." Wu Zetian issued 5 imperial edicts in one breath. She panted heavily and waved at one, or quickly bowed and retreated. Wu Zetian slowly walked to the stone railing outside the hall with her walking stick. The palace eunuchs, standing outside the hall, quickly bowed to greet her. Wu Zetian did not speak. She stood in front of the stone railing and let the wind blow her white hair. She squinted her eyes and looked to the north. Her old hand gripped the dragon head of her walking stick tightly and slammed it on the ground 3 times. She gritted her teeth and said, "Hebei, Hebei, in 1,000 gold smelting city." Li Duozhua smiled bitterly and said to Yang Fan, "It is like this now. Wu Yi is not moving and does not allow us to get close to him. Su Honghu is always chasing after the Khitans. We have no way of contacting him. Right now, we only have 20,000 people. Half of them are heavy troops. Our fighting power is limited." Just as he said this, a soldier suddenly rushed in and knelt on one knee. He cupped his fists and reporting, "Great General, we have just received an urgent military report. The Khitans have suddenly appeared northwest of Horse City. It looks like they want to attack Horse City. The magistrate of Horse City has sent people over to ask Great General for help." Chapter 742. Horse City? The Khitans have passed by Horse City several times, but never entered. Why would they have designs on Horse City now? Li Duozhua was shocked and hurriedly turned to look at the map on the wall. This map was a relatively simple one that he had drawn after asking the local magistrate. It could only mark the approximate location of the various cities and a few well-known mountains and rivers. Its military value was limited, and it could only enhance the impression of the image. Li Duozhua pointed at the small circle with the 2 words Horse City and pondered for a long time. Li Duozhua not only had few soldiers, but also few generals. At most, he only had the 2 generals he brought from the Yulin Guard and Ma Qiao. Other than them, there was only Yang Fan. In total, there were only these 4 generals. Among the 4, Ma Qiao and Yang Fan were half-baked. Ma Qiao had been in the army for many years and climbed up step by step from being a soldier. His martial arts were outstanding, and he was good at commanding troops and formations. But his ability to analyze the enemy's situation and strategize was far from good. Yang Fan could play an even worse role in the army than him. He was not good at leading troops, marching, and formations. In battles, he mainly relied on his own bravery, and was not good at commanding a unit to bring out the strength of a group. As for strategizing, it was not his forte. Therefore, the two obediently stood to the side and played the role of Su Shu. Yulin Guard General Li Mulan said, "Great General, Horse City is not big and has few resources. The Khitans have passed through this area in the past and have never had any designs on it. Now that the Khitans have plundered more resources, there is even less need to think about it. If we forcefully attack, the Khitans will lose more than they gain. Could it be that the Khitans are passing through this area to rest and reorganize and cause the magistrate of Horse City to panic?" Li Duozhua frowned and lightly shook his head. He said, "We are still not clear on the Khitans' goal. We are also not clear on how many troops they have. It is difficult to determine their real goal from the information we have now." Another Yulin Guard, General Chu Yi, said, "The enemy's situation is unclear and our army is weak. It is not advisable to act rashly. Great General, we should first send out scouts to investigate the situation of the Khitans before making a move." Li Duozhua nodded and said, "We have to send scouts. Quickly send someone to investigate the Khitan people's background. Also, ask the local magistrate to arrange a local guide to accompany them. Our scouts are not familiar with the geography here." Chu Yi agreed and hurried out. The few of them continued to discuss in the commander's tent, but they still could not find a solution to the Khitan scheme. Just at this time, a soldier came to report that the Ma county magistrate had sent someone over. Li Duozhua called for the messenger to be brought in. After reading the letter personally written by the Ma county magistrate, he asked him, "You said that the Khitans brought a large amount of looted goods?" The messenger said, "Yes. The Khitans were now stationed at Pingjia Ao, 40 li southwest of Ma City. A local woodcutter was startled to see a large number of Khitans entering the mountain. When he was fleeing in panic, he saw it. He said that the Khitans had several hundred carriages, big and small, piled high with provisions and all kinds of valuables." Li Mulan's face showed a relaxed expression and said, "It seems that the so-called attack on Ma City was just a false alarm. The Khitans have so much provisions, it is impossible for them to have any designs on a small city like Ma City. Ma City is built on a mountain, easy to defend and hard to attack. Moreover, the mountain city is barren and has nothing to plunder. The Khitans are not interested in this place." The messenger sent by the Ma county magistrate said, "Sir General, we also thought that the Khitans have no interest in Ma City, but their troops have already arrived. They first sent riders to patrol the surroundings of Ma City, and then the main army arrived. They are stationed at the south and west sides of Ma City and are currently building siege weapons." Li Duozhua also thought that the Ma county magistrate was being paranoid, but when he heard this news, he could not help but frown. It is understandable that the Khitans let the northern part of the city go. They're not good at attacking cities, and their aim has always been to plunder and not to destroy the entire city. That is why they have always let one side of the city go, hoping that the defenders in the city will escape without a fight and then enter the city to plunder. Now that they have put on such a posture, it is obvious that they have designs on Ma City. But how many troops does the Khitans have? If they want to go to help, they will have to fight in the open. Li Duozhua not only has few troops, but the cavalry in his hands is also limited. If he rashly sends troops, he will not be able to solve the siege of Ma City and will instead lose his entire army. If that is the case, it is better to defend Tianjin, smelting to the death." The messenger from Ma City kept urging, but before he has more accurate information, Li Duozhua naturally will not act rashly. Li Duozhua ordered someone to take the messenger from Ma City to rest first, while he continued to analyze the Khitans' battle intentions while waiting for news from the scout. In the middle of the night, the scout finally returned. Li Duozhua heard the news and hurriedly got out of bed to ask about the news. Yang Fan, Ma Chiao, Chu Yi, and Li Mulan lived near the commander's tent, and when they heard the news, they also hurried over. Yang Fan did not tell Li Duozhua that his family had chased him to the north, so it was not appropriate for Nu and Gu Zhuting to show up. Fortunately, the two of them changed their appearances after returning to the city and pretended to be big merchants who had done a righteous deed. They still lived in their original residence. The county magistrate treated the two like distinguished guests and was naturally attentive to them. The scout was in his early 30s, looked capable, and spoke in an orderly manner. "Great General, the Khitans are indeed attacking Ma City. When I rushed to the vicinity of Ma City, they have already used the trees in the mountains to make some simple siege weapons, started a big fire, and attacked Ma City at night." The generals under Li Duozhua's command all tensed up. The scout continued, "Brothers, climb the mountain and observe from the fire at the foot of the mountain. The Khitans surrounded the west side of the city, but did not attack. They are concentrating their forces to attack the south side, and their total force is about 10,000. Ma City is not big, especially when it is built on the mountain, so it is more difficult to attack from the west side. If they only concentrate their forces to attack the south side, 10,000 men and horses are enough. Any more, and they will not be able to deploy their forces, and in reality, only 5,000 to 6,000 men can be put into battle." Li Duozhua asked in a deep voice, "How many men are guarding Pingjia Ao?" The scouts split up, some going to Ma City, and some going to Pingjia Ao. All the information was gathered and reported to the scout leader, so the scout knew everything. He immediately answered, "Brothers, we are groping in the dark to spy on Pingjia Ao, but we can't see very clearly. I estimate that there are no more than 3,000 men defending." He paused and added, "Pingjia Ao is flanked by steep cliffs, and only herbalists and woodcutters can climb it with ropes. The army can neither pass through nor defend. The Khitans only need to guard the valley entrance, and 3,000 men is enough. Brothers, we estimate that there are less than 3,000 men defending the valley entrance because there is no space for more men there." Li Duozhua nodded lightly. Li Mulan angrily said, "The Khitans are so arrogant, and they don't even care about us. They know that we are stationed here, but they split their forces to attack Ma City, leaving only 3,000 men to guard the supplies. They are so arrogant that they don't care about us at all." The scout looked slightly embarrassed. "General," he said, "I haven't finished. I was investigating, and on the way back to 1,000 Gold Smelter, I smelled the scent of horses. It's impossible for 1 or 2 horses to emit such a strong scent. I was suspicious, so I left the horses and went to investigate on foot. I found a Khitan army lying in ambush by the Sunset River. The horses did not roar, and the men were silent. It is very secretive. It seems that the Khitans are prepared and did not let the horses make any sound. Because it is dark, I can't accurately estimate their numbers. Based on the terrain, I estimate that there are at most 8,000 men. I did not dare to stay for long, afraid that they will find out, so I quickly returned." Li Duozhua's expression changed, and he quickly looked at the map again. This map was drawn according to the oral accounts of the locals. Naturally, the closer it is, the clearer it is, and the further it is, the more sparse it is. Ma City is the closest city to 1,000 Gold Smelter, and the two have the most frequent interactions. Therefore, the middle road of the mountains and rivers is the most clearly drawn. Li Duozhua looked carefully. Setting Sun River is the intersection of 2 large rivers, and there is a delta here. This is the place where the Khitan army is lying in ambush. Li Duozhua carefully recalled the geography and area of that place that he knew. If it was all cavalry, there should be at most 5,000 of them. Although he could arrange for more people, in reality, once they started to charge, they would not be able to arrange themselves properly, which would instead affect their combat power. This river mouth was the key to 1,000 Gold Smelting City's reinforcements. 1,000 Gold Smelting City was to the north of Horse City, and it was currently the beginning of winter with the northern winds blowing. Thus, the reinforcements would not be able to pick up the scent of so many war horses. If it is not for the scouts' discovery, When Li Duozhua is rushing to reinforce, the Khitan army will suddenly attack. Thinking about the Khitan's treachery, Li Duozhua can't help but suck in a cold breath. He has a total of 20,000 men and horses, and almost half of them are heavily armed. Their combat power is limited. Moreover, once they go to reinforce, it is impossible for him not to leave a portion of his troops to guard 1,000 gold smelter. The number of troops that can reinforce Ma City is limited. If this limited force is ambushed by the Khitan army halfway through, it will only be a matter of time before the whole army is annihilated. Li Mulan's expression is unsightly. He said, "What a cunning Khitan army. If that is the case, we cannot send reinforcements." Chu Yi's expression is also solemn. He said, "We do not know how many soldiers the Khitans have left. Maybe they have an ambush in the dark, waiting for us to send troops to attack 1,000 gold smelter. Although there is not much food in the city, there is a large amount of ironware. The Khitans have fought continuously, so their arrows and weapons must be badly damaged. I am afraid this is their real target." Li Duozhua shook his head. He said no. If this is the arrangement of their troops, then their target should be Ma City. Or they want to devour our reinforcements and then send troops to seize 1,000 gold smelter. The possibility of another ambush is not high. Li Duozhua pointed to the map and said, "Look, according to the latest battle report we received, one Khitan unit is defending against Great General Lu Shidla's troops at Mount Kielu. The other unit is at Kuinyang River, confronting Wu Yui's unit. Although the Khitans have won repeatedly and are becoming more arrogant, to defend against these two troops, each unit will have at least 20,000 men. Although the Khitans won successive victories, causing some of the smaller Khitan tribes that did not rebel with them to seek refuge with them, they only managed to replenish the Khitans' losses from the successive battles. Their total military strength was still only 60 to 70,000. In this case, the Khitans that appeared in the Ma City area are at most 20,000 men. The ones attacking Ma City, the ones guarding the supplies, and the ambush along the road, the total number is about 20,000. They have used up all their forces, so they have no spare forces to send another ambush." Knowing that he is not good at military affairs, Yang Fan is hiding his strength. Looking at Li Duozhua's gestures on the map, his heart suddenly thumped. He thought of a terrible possibility. Mr. Su Shu coughed and was ready to speak. Chapter 743. Yang Fan wasn't sure if his guess was correct or not. In a field that he wasn't good at, it was inevitable that he wasn't confident. But if his guess was correct, then the consequences would be too severe. So he didn't dare to hide it, even if his idea was too ridiculous and would be ridiculed by others. He coughed and gathered his courage to speak. But Ma Qiao suddenly jumped up like a toad that had been poked in the butt and shouted, "I've got it! I've got it! We can directly send troops to attack their nest. Pingjia Ao!" With a swoosh, everyone's eyes were focused on him. They completely ignored Yang Fan's cough. Yang Fan's right foot that had stretched out quietly retracted. Li Duozhua said, "Attack Pingjia Ao." "That's right." Ma Qiao rushed to the map and pointed. "Great General, please take a look. From here to Pingjia Ao, there's another path that doesn't need to go through the road to Horse City. If they want to attack the city, we'll let them attack. If they want to ambush, we'll let them ambush. We'll directly cut off their retreat route." Ma Qiao said excitedly, "We'll first attack Pingjia Ao and burn all their rations. Then we'll immediately return to defend the city. Without rations, they won't have the mood to attack Horse City anymore. Even if we break the city, they won't have enough supplies. Under such circumstances, their only choice is to leave." After Ma Qiao finished, he looked at Li Duozhua excitedly and asked, "What does Great General think?" Li Duozhua's expression was wooden. He only lightly shook his head. Ma Qiao was greatly disappointed. He said anxiously, "It won't work? I think we can try this method." Li Mulan explained, "Commander Ma, The Khitan ambush at Sunset River is a cavalry. They're located between Horse City and Pingjiao. It'll be very easy for them to reinforce Pingjiao. Pingjiao may only have 3,000 men, but they're guarding the valley. 3,000 men guarding a narrow mountain pass. It'll be very difficult for us to quickly break through. Chui said, "That's right. Pingjiao isn't close to here. If we want to launch a surprise attack on Pingjiao, we'll have to use cavalry. Right now, we have more than 8,000 cavalry. If we can't quickly break through the mountain pass and the Khitan ambushers return in time, we'll be trapped at the mountain pass of Pingjiao. That will be dangerous." When Ma Qiao heard that, he couldn't help feeling a bit dispirited. However, the knowledge of battle formations was something that could only be accumulated bit by bit. After their explanations, Ma Qiao would be much more careful and meticulous the next time he came up with a strategy or tactic. He would be much more rash and impulsive. The tent fell silent again. Yang Fan coughed again. Li Duozhua looked up at him with a questioning expression. Yang Fan said somewhat bashfully, "This general's time in the army is really too short. My ability to lead troops into battle is not only inferior to that of General Li, but also far inferior to my colleagues. Perhaps my train of thought is not correct, but I still want to say it. Even if it can serve as a starting point for General and my colleagues, it's good enough." Li Duozhua smiled and encouraged him. "Yang Shaowei, you're too humble. When marching and fighting as generals, we should work together. No one dares to say that their ideas are definitely correct or foolproof. Commander Ma did very well just now. If you have any ideas, feel free to say them." Yang Fan nodded and smiled at everyone. Stepping forward, he said, "What I want to say is not just the siege of Ma City, but—" Yang Fan tapped on the map 3 times, respectively at Kuinyang River, Xiaola Mountain, and Ma City. He said in a loud voice, "This general has some doubts. The Khitans are good at riding and shooting. They are adept at mobility. Unless it's like the Yellow Deer Valley, where they can ambush us and take advantage of the terrain to annihilate us, they will rarely engage us in a head-on battle. Instead, they will drag our troops around and wait for an opportunity to swallow us up. In that case—" Yang Fan turned around, his gaze sweeping past Li Duozhua, Chu Yi, and Li Mulan. As for his own brother, he was automatically ignored. He was not good at tactics. Although Ma Qiao was stronger than him, there was a limit to how strong he was. But in terms of strategy, what was needed was meticulous thinking and a higher vision. A brilliant strategist was not necessarily a general who was good at leading troops in battle. That was why there were often commoner scholars who could devise strategies. Although Yang Fan did not know if his estimation was correct, he knew that in this aspect, with Ma Qiao's current ability, it was impossible for him to raise any doubts or ideas. Yang Fan said, "Great General, colleagues, please think about it. Why did the Khitans act out of character and adopt the tactic of confronting and blocking Great General Liu and Great General Wu's troops? There is nothing in their rear that they need to guard. They should be dragging our troops around and waiting for an opportunity to swallow up every single unit that is left behind. And this group of people attacking Horse City, we all know that Horse City does not have many things they need. So why did they go through so much trouble to attack Horse City? They have stockpiled so much food at Pingjiao. Instead of taking advantage of the other 2 main forces, restraining the Imperial Army to hurry to their nest in Ying Prefecture, they stopped here to attack Horse City. What are they trying to do?" Chu Yi and Li Mulan frowned in thought. Li Duozhua's eyes flashed, and he asked urgently, "You mean their various abnormalities are for a greater purpose?" Yang Fan nodded solemnly. "This general indeed thinks so. Great General, please look here." Yang Fan turned back to the map and pointed at Horse City and Thousand Gold Smelting City. Other than these 2 cities, the surroundings are all mountains and uninhabited. If these 2 cities fall into the enemy's hands, then Yang Fan's finger traced along the stone valleys of the east and west gorges, all the way to Lulong. Not only can they obtain a large amount of ironware from 1,000 gold smelting city to forge weapons, but more importantly, these two cities are the only two cities south of Yellow Deer Valley. If they defend these two cities, they will be able to block Lulong's path to the south. The Khitans have already started building their foundation in Ing Prefecture. All the fortified cities in the northwest are garrisoned by their armies. It will be difficult for them to break through. Other than that, the only path to the south is Lulong, which is close to the east. This city is the furthest from the cities in the northwest and will not be easy to reinforce. Once 1,000 gold smelting city and horse city fall into their hands, Lulong will become an isolated city. At that time, they will be able to uproot Lulong. Then, Chu-yi blurted out. In that case, they would have grasped a path to the south, connecting Yingzhou, Lulong, and then Yellow Deer Valley to Qianjinyi and Machang. Yang Fan said, "That's right. This is what this one is thinking of. Considering that they are trying to form an alliance with the Turks, as long as they are not stupid, they have even more reason to do so. Once they form an alliance, the Turks will be in the west, the Shi in the middle, and the Khitans will be in the east. They will form a steel fork, pushing southward step by step. By doing so, they will be able to work closely with the Turks and respond to each other. At the same time, they will be able to avoid being eaten up by the capricious Turks. At the same time, they will have ample space to grow stronger. If that's what they're after, then there's a good reason for their series of abnormal actions." Finishing, Yang Fan smiled modestly at the crowd. "This is what this one is thinking. I don't know if it is correct." Li Duozhua walked forward step by step, his eyes fixed on the map. He stared at the 2 points of Xiala Mountain and Kuanyang River for a long time, then moved his eyes to Machang, Qianjinyi, Lulong, and finally Yingzhou. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid, unfortunately, you are right. This is probably their plan." Li Duozhua said, "If that's the case, then their strange actions of confronting the northern and southern armies at Chimbing Gorge and Kuanyang River can be explained. Attacking Horse City also makes sense. After taking Horse City, they will cut off our communication with the outside world. Then, taking down 1,000 gold smelting is only a matter of time. If they can use Horse City as bait to eat our reinforcements when attacking Horse City, it will be easier to take down 1,000 gold smelting. Even if we are not willing to send troops, they can cut off our escape route and rely on the rations they have stored at Pingjia Ao to drag us down. Lulong can't even protect himself and won't dare to send troops to support us. At that time, with Horse City in hand, they can use its geographical advantage to repel the army of the court. With 1,000 gold smelting in hand, they can rely on its ironware to supply their armors. Horse City, 1,000 gold smelting, and the east and west valleys will become their first line of defense against the army of the court." After that, Li Duozhua let out a long sigh and said no more, but everyone in the tent understood what he meant. Even Ma Qiao understood. At that time, Lulong would certainly not be safe, and the Khitans would link up the strategic points and establish a deep base. It would be even more difficult for the imperial court to exterminate them. Seeing that Li Duozhua agreed with his judgment, Yang Fan's confidence grew. He said, "So, we must solve the siege of Horse City. If we do not send troops after Horse City changes hands, it will be 1,000 gold smelting. We will be exterminated sooner or later. Solving the siege of Horse City is the same as solving our own siege." Li Mulan frowned and said, "But how will we go to help? Even if we already know that there is an ambush by the Khitans at the setting Sun River and the ambush is no longer effective, it will still be enough to stop us from going to help. The Khitans besieging Horse City can support them at any time. With our inferior military strength and low morale, it is impossible to solve the siege of Horse City." Yang Fan asked, "If we can first take out the Khitan ambush, can we change the balance of power between us and the enemy?" Li Mulan's eyes brightened. He said, "Of course we can, but how can we take out this ambush?" Yang Fan slowly said, "There are not many methods we can use. If we go to solve the siege of Horse City, regardless of whether we know that the Khitans are lying in ambush or not, it will be a tough battle. It will be difficult for us to win. But other than this, there are too few methods we can use. Perhaps there is only one way, and that is to burn their rations. Hearing this, Ma Chao became spirited. He thought that Yang Fan also agreed with his strategy. But this strategy has already been rejected by great General Li Duozhua. Yang Fan brought it up again. Could it be that he has a way to solve the problem of ambushing Ping Jiao? Chu Yi said impatiently. Officer Yang, in the end, isn't it still back to this problem? Ambushing Ping Jiao is simply impossible. The ambush is between Ping Jiao and Horse City. As long as we attack Ping Jiao, the garrison in the valley will set fire as a warning, and the enemy will immediately return to help. Before we can break through the mountain pass, we will be blocked by the Khitans' reinforcements. Yang Fan revealed his bashful expression again. This general's time in the army is too short. I have never led an army or fought a battle. This is just a random idea, but I don't know if it will work. But this general still wants to say it, even if it can serve as a bait for great general. Chapter 744. The night was dark and moonless, making it difficult to distinguish people from a dozen paces away. It was perfect for an ambush. The 5,500 Khitan horsemen stealthily hid by the banks of the setting Sun River. The men did not dare to speak, and the horses also tightened their throats to prevent them from suddenly raising their heads to the sky and neighing. 5,500 people and 5,500 horses. Even if the sounds of their breathing were gathered together, it was still an unconcealable sound wave. However, the sound of the river water covered it very well. If the Zhou army only discovered them when they got close, it would already be too late. The Khitans had already tasted many benefits from ambushes by the Zhou army. They had too few people and could not afford to fight the Zhou army, so this kind of tactic was the most suitable. So they habitually wanted to use the ambush method to destroy the Zhou army in 1,000 gold smelting city. A commander stealthily approached the commander of the ambush army, Luo Wuzhen, and whispered, "Boss, there's still no movement from the Zhou army. Could it be that they don't dare to send troops?" Luo Wuzhen was a little annoyed that Zhou Jun hadn't arrived yet. He said, "It's already the third watch, and there's no sign of them at all. I think it's unlikely that they'll come. Damn it, could it be that I've sent too many men to Horse City and scared them off? I only sent 10,000 men. They shouldn't be afraid to send troops, right?" Ever since Sun Wanrong led the Khitan army to defeat the Zhou army in East Gorgestone Valley, their entire strategy began to change. Previously, they had always been scattered and fought on the move without any long-term plans. To put it bluntly, they were a group of bandits without roots. Even if they could obtain some temporary victories, they could easily collapse at a setback. Ever since Sun Wanrong defeated the Zhou army in East Gorgestone Valley and even killed Wang Xiaojia, they began to establish a strategy. Externally, they continued to ally with the Shi people and began to prepare for an alliance with the Turks. Internally, they began to establish their own base. They had not yet sent anyone to the Turks to negotiate an alliance. The Turks were a powerful race and would become a powerful ally, but they were also a dangerous ally. The Turks were fickle and only cared about profit. Compared to the Khitans, they cared even less about contracts and oaths. They needed to first arrange everything and establish their own territory before they could negotiate an alliance with the Turks. Therefore, the occupation of Horse City and 1,000 gold smelting city became the key step for them to establish their strongholds. They had attacked Lulong several times, and the Zhou army had always sent troops from this direction to relieve the siege. Although the rescue operations had failed one after another, which gave them a great advantage, it also ruined their plan to occupy Lulong. Now, the only way to deal with Lulong was to conquer these two cities first. Because of the importance of this matter, Sun Wanrong had sent his right-hand man, Luo Wuzhen, to personally take charge of this matter. Luo Wuzhen chewed on a piece of hay and paced around twice before making a decision. Let's wait a little longer. If the Zhou army really refuses to come out, then we will turn around and attack the northern part of Horse City. We will attack from the north and south and take this city first. Only then will we be able to obtain 1,000 gold smelting city. Just as Luo Wuzhen finished speaking, the soldiers suddenly became restless. Luo Wuzhen flew into a rage and bellowed, "Anyone who dares to speak nonsense will be killed. Who dares to disobey a military order? Great commander, look over there." The soldiers under him ignored his threat and rushed in front of him, pointing in a direction for him to look. Luo Wuzhen quickly turned around and saw the flickering of fire in the distance. In the darkness of the night, because the fire was far away, he could not see how powerful it was, but because it was far away, he could see how big the fire was. Luo Wuzhen exclaimed, "Ping Ao! Something has happened at Ping Ao." The commander beside him said in amazement, "The Zhou army is very capable. How did they know where our rations and supplies are stored?" Luo Wuzhen said, "This is Wu Zhou's territory. There must be a villager who reported to the Zhou army that we have stored rations at Ping Ao." The commander said anxiously, "Great chieftain, what should we do? If the rations are burned, our tens of thousands of soldiers will have nowhere to hide." Luo Wuzhen looked up to the sky and laughed. "Ha ha ha! You think you can defeat me by attacking my granary? I left 3,000 elite soldiers at Ping Ao. With the dangerous terrain of the Ao, no matter how many troops they have, they can forget about taking it down in a short time. When I sent my troops to Horse City, I instructed the troops to set fire to warn if they were attacked by the enemy. This must be a sneak attack by the Zhou army, and they released the warning signal." Luo Wuzhen said excitedly, "Pass down the order. Everyone get on the horses and rush to Ping Ao. We must stop this group of Zhou army that attacked our rear camp and capture them all in one fell swoop." Under Luo Wuzhen's order, the Khitan knights untied their horses and removed the soft cloth wrapped around their hooves. In a short moment, they were in order. The sentries in front led the way, and the entire army lit up their torches. Under the starry sky, they charged towards Ping Ao as fast as lightning. "Quick! Quick! Faster!" Luo Wuzhen whipped his horse and loudly urged his soldiers to move. Riding a horse at night, they couldn't go much faster even if they wanted to. Fortunately, there were sentries in front to lead the way, and the entire army lit up their torches, illuminating the entire road. Only then could the war horses advance at 60% of their usual speed. Traveling at this speed for more than 10 li was actually a huge drain on the horses. However, Luo Wuzhen didn't dare to delay. He was afraid that once the fire alarm sounded, the Zhou army's sneak attack would be obstructed, so he decisively retreated. In order to prevent the Zhou army from escaping, he even took a detour and took a shortcut from the Zhou army's rear. Crack! As the army advanced, the trees on both sides of the road suddenly fell down one by one, smashing the huge umbrella-like treetops towards the countless knights in the middle of the road. Following that, the sounds of killing rang out and countless sharp arrows shot out from the night. The torches were the best targets. Even if the accuracy of the arrows was not that good, it would still be enough to cause a lot of damage if they were to be shot down in such a manner. "Not good, there's an ambush. Quick, disperse to the side of the road." Luo Wuzhen unsheathed his saber and shouted sternly. Before he said a word, a tall and strong steed appeared from the darkness. It was like a ghost that had leaped out of the night, but the aura it exuded was unparalleled. It was like a roaring beast. Ma Qiao sat upright on the horse, holding a snow-white saber in his hand. He slashed left and right and killed his way into the chaotic crowd. Kill! Kill! Countless knights swarmed over from both sides of the road. Other than the cavalry, there were also many infantry. They either held shields in one hand or sabers in the other, and they specialized in stabbing the horses' abdomens. Some wielded long spears and took advantage of the chaos, preventing the Khitan cavalry from displaying their advantage in speed. Under the cover of the darkness, they stabbed the sharp tips of their spears into the Khitan soldiers' chests. Many people in the Zhou army had injuries of one sort or another. Some of their injuries hadn't healed yet, but once they charged into the enemy's ranks, their blood boiled and they forgot everything. They only remembered to brandish the weapons in their hands with all their might, listening to the sounds of sharp weapons stabbing into people's bodies and hearing the screams of the enemy. They killed even more fiercely. They were all survivors of the battle in the Yellow Deer Valley. They did not forget how they escaped from death, nor did they forget their fallen comrades. Some of them were neighbors who joined the army together. Some were relatives and friends who were related to each other, and some were comrades who slept in the same big tent and ate the same rice pot. They had all lost their lives in Yellow Deer Valley, and this moment was the time for revenge. The Zhou army that came out of the darkness were like vengeful demons. They didn't forget to stab the Khitan soldiers who hadn't stopped breathing. They charged at the Khitan soldiers who tried to escape without regard for the danger and used their war horses to knock them over. Those who didn't ride on horses would throw themselves under the horses' abdomens, chopping the horses' legs and stabbing the horses' abdomens. In short, everyone had to stay. No one was allowed to leave. Tonight was the night to settle their grudges. The Khitan general, Xing Kaier, stood on the mountain and looked into the distance. He listened carefully for a while. The fire that had suddenly started was gradually extinguished. Separated by a mountain, he could no longer see clearly, but the sounds of battle could be clearly heard in the silent night. Even with a mountain between them, he could still hear them clearly. What's going on? What's going on? Xing Kaier was so anxious that he was spinning around. Although he had sent out scouts, they were separated by a mountain. Although it looked close, it wasn't easy to climb down the mountain. He hadn't received any reports yet. However, he had vaguely guessed something in his heart, but he just didn't want to believe it. They had been ambushed by the Zhou army. That night, Xing Kaier was patrolling the sentry posts when he suddenly found that there was a fire in front of him. Xing Kaier wasn't worried at first. He thought that it was just a sudden mountain fire, and the fire couldn't burn all the way here. They chose a place to store food, so they naturally wouldn't choose a place with dense trees. The mountains in the north weren't completely covered by forests, especially the mountains in this area. Not to mention winter. Even in spring or summer, the mountain slope in front of him was covered with large black rocks. There were only a few small trees and weeds, so the fire couldn't burn all the way here. But he immediately felt that something was wrong, because Chief Luo had once ordered that if the Zhou army attacked the mountain, he had to light the fire as a warning. He knew that Chief Luo was setting up an ambush tonight to catch the Zhou army off guard. If Chief Luo saw the fire and thought that it was Xing Kaier who was warning them, wouldn't that ruin Chief Luo's plan? Xing Kaier immediately sent people to the ambush to report the situation. At the same time, he sent people to climb up the mountain slope to see what was going on. In the end, he didn't know if the people he sent to investigate the situation in front of him had arrived or not. At this moment, there were continuous shouts of killing. Wasn't the situation obvious? A few of the leaders were so anxious that they rubbed their palms together and asked for battle. Chief Xing, this must be a trap set up by the Zhou army. Our reinforcements were ambushed. Chief Xing should immediately gather troops and rush over to help. The Zhou army only has one unit from 1,000 gold smelting city, so there shouldn't be too many of them. 3,000 of us will be of great help. Xing Kaier was still hesitating. Chief Luo ordered me to guard the food. This is the foundation of our army. If something goes wrong, Chief Luo's brother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and cursed loudly. Go wrong my ass. There are cliffs on both sides. Can the Zhou army climb up? If only 3 to 5 people come up, it's useless. And if the Zhou army wants to attack this valley, they have to pass through the mountain in front first. There is a fierce battle in front. Can the Zhou army pass through? You only need to leave 300 to 500 people to take care of it. Why can't the others go and help? The one surnamed Xing, are you afraid of death? Xing Kaier was so angry that his face turned red. He shouted, Yang Mei, don't you think you can be rude to me just because of Chief Luo's reputation? I, Xing Kaier, am in charge here. When the leaders saw this, they all came forward to persuade him. But from their words, they still felt that they should rush to the front of the mountain to help. Xing Kaier had no choice but to order, leave 400 people to guard the food. I will lead the others to the front of the mountain immediately to help. When Xing Kaier gave the order, the 3,000 Khitan soldiers immediately got to work. At this time, Yang Fan had just climbed to the cliffs of the Ping family. The mountain wind howled, making his clothes flutter. Chapter 745. On the cliff, there was an old pine tree sticking out of the cliff. Its branches were strong and as thick as a human's leg. Yang Fan was overjoyed to see it. Without taking a breath, he untied the rope tied around his waist and tested the strength of the pine tree. The roots of the pine tree were deeply rooted in the crevice of the rock. He stepped on it a few times, but it didn't move at all. Yang Fan climbed up the pine tree, put the rope on the trunk, and went down the cliff. When he climbed up the cliff, he felt that the original plan was somewhat difficult. The cliff was uneven, and it was difficult to see far at night. Even with the help of the flying hook, it took him a lot of effort to climb up. And because the cliff was uneven, there were many sharp and protruding rocks in many places, and the mountain wind was fast. If he used his hands to carry the barrels of tung oil up, he was afraid that they would either be scraped by the protruding cliff or smashed by the strong wind on the cliff. Now that he had this old pine tree, it was much more convenient. Almost at the same time, Anu and Gu Zhuting also climbed to the top of the cliff, standing beside him and looking into the valley. In the valley, the 3,000 Khitan people were already moving. The torches were like stars in the sky. Anu stuck out her tongue and said, "The cliff here is really high. No wonder it took us so long to climb." At this time, Yang Fan had already brought the rope to the top of the cliff. At the end of the rope was an iron hook. The people at the bottom of the cliff hung a barrel of tung oil on the iron hook. Yang Fan used the trunk of the pine tree as an axis to quickly lift up a barrel of oil, followed by a second barrel, a third barrel, while Nu and Gu Zhuting moved the oil barrels to the top of the cliff and arranged them more evenly on the top of the cliff. This cliff was rugged. Perhaps no one had climbed up since ancient times, especially in the dark. If one was not careful, it was very easy to lose one's footing and fall. Only with their skills could they walk like it was flat ground. The rope used the trunk of the pine tree as an axis to avoid scratching, but the constant friction made the rope a little hot. Fortunately, this was a rope used in the supply camp. The hemp rope was mixed with metal threads, so it was extremely tough. After about 50 barrels of tung oil were lifted up, there was no movement at the bottom. Yang Fan returned to the cliff from the pine tree like a spirit ape. He said to Anu and Gu Zhuting, "Get ready." The two women were very happy, as if this was a game. Indeed, although what they were doing was dangerous to them, standing on the cliff was the greatest guarantee of safety. This was indeed like a game to them. Yang Fan peered into the valley. The torches in the valley had already gathered together and became extremely dense, following which the rows of torches in front of them began to move outwards. It seemed like they were about to leave the valley. Yang Fan's heart was stirred. First he found a fist-sized rock and placed it by his side, and then he picked up a barrel of tung oil. Aiming at the densely packed torches, he suddenly threw it with all his might. Immediately after that, he picked up the rock and ruthlessly struck the barrel of oil. The torches in the valley became a very recognizable background, allowing the rock to accurately hit the barrel of tung oil. The hardwood barrel of oil was struck by Yang Fan with all his might and instantly shattered. The tung oil turned into rain that filled the sky and drifted towards the valley. Standing on the right side of Yang Fan, Anu and Gu Zhuting, who were more than 100 feet away from him, raised the oil barrel in a standard manner. Using all the strength in their bodies, they smashed it towards the vaguely recognizable supply wagons in the valley. The oil barrel that Anu and Gu Zhuting threw away landed on the ground before Yongfan. Standing on the cliff top, they only heard a very light sound of impact. Following that, they saw the densely packed torches shake. It seemed like the Khitan soldiers in the valley heard the sound and subconsciously turned their heads to look. Then, the torches suddenly burst into flames. As if blown by the wind, they suddenly emitted the brightest light and heat. With a boom, a group of people on fire appeared. Their shrill howls reached the top of the cliff, and they could hear them clearly. The people on fire couldn't even open their eyes. They could only close their eyes and stumble. As a result, some people who were splashed with oil, but luckily did not become people on fire, also became one of them. Seeing this, Anu and Gu Zhuting were overjoyed. They hurriedly followed Yongfan's example and threw out the oil barrels, then smashed them in midair with stones. More and more people on fire were bumping around in the valley. Yongfan called out, "Focus on burning the grain. It's good that they're in a mess." Anu was having fun, so how could she bear to let go? She said innocently, "You burn the grain, you have more strength." Yongfan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only pick up the oil barrels and try his best to throw them at the grain wagons. Meanwhile, Anu and Gu Zhuting kept splashing oil on the Khitan soldiers in the valley. Because the Khitan soldiers were gathering to rush to the front mountain to rescue the people who were ambushed, they had nowhere to hide under the attack of the oil rain. Even if some clever soldiers threw their torches far away in time, it was useless. They were splashed with oil, and when they were touched by the people on fire who were bumping around, they immediately became a moving torch. Soon, someone bumped into a grain wagon that was splashed with oil. The fire was ignited, and the whole valley was burning. Standing on the top of the cliff, one's face was illuminated by the fire. Chu Yi, who was lying in ambush outside the valley, was stunned by the situation in the valley. He only brought 800 people and quietly sneaked to the front of the mountain to ambush. If there were more people, it would be easy to be discovered by the Khitan people patrolling the mountain pass. According to his agreement with Yongfan, Yongfan would throw the oil barrels into the valley and ignite the grain wagons. There were many livestock in the valley, so once the fire started, it would be a great shock and bring the whole valley into chaos. Then he would lead these 800 carefully selected warriors who were skilled in martial arts to kill their way into the valley. But looking at the situation in the valley, the people on fire were like headless flies, and the frightened livestock were bumping around. Even if there were a few dozen people killing their way into the valley, they would most likely be able to win easily. This battle, wasn't it too easy to win? Chu Langjiang calmed himself down and came to his senses. He suddenly pulled out his saber and shouted, "Attack! Charge!" 800 warriors rushed into the valley like a whirlwind. The group of people on fire who bore the brunt of the attack were freed by their sabers. As for those Khitan soldiers who were not on fire, they completely lost the ability to fight in their panic and were chopped into meat paste by the ferocious generals and soldiers. Seeing that Yongfan wanted to say something but did not dare to, Li Duozhua was a little afraid. But when Yongfan spoke of his plan, he was stunned. The reason why Yongfan was hesitant was not because he was deliberately putting on an act, but because he really did not understand some of the general knowledge of commanding troops in battle. For example, how many a soldier could march in a day, how many days of food they could carry, how many arrows each person could carry, what kind of terrain should the troops choose to set up camp in, how many layers of defense should be set up inside and outside, and what use should they have. He did not understand all of these. How could someone who did not understand these things lead troops? When it came to his plan, what he wasn't clear about was whether there was a place between the Sunset River and Pengjiao where he could set up an ambush. If he set up an ambush there, would he be able to annihilate such a powerful cavalry unit with only slightly more troops than the other side? In the process of battle, would the Khitan attacking Ma City be able to gather their troops and return in time to help, so that they could form a counter-encirclement? He was not sure about these things, but Li Duozhua was very clear about them. So when Yang Fan fantasized about lighting a fire to lure the Khitan soldiers back to help, Li Duozhua immediately thought that this plan would work. Using a false alarm to lure the Khitan soldiers lying in ambush to return and then killing them along the way was completely different from engaging the Khitan army in the same mountain head-on and luring back reinforcements to join the battle in the middle of the battle. Moreover, with the limited troops he had at his disposal, especially with the army's low morale after repeated defeats, the effect of fighting an enemy ambush and fighting them head-on was completely different. As for the Khitan army attacking Ma City, it was impossible for them to see fire from a distance of 50 li. Even if they did see it, it would take at least an hour for even the most well-trained army to assemble an attacking force under the cover of night and return to help, much less the Khitans. This plan was completely feasible, so Yang Fan came up with ideas, and Li Duozhua supplemented and perfected the specific operational plan. Thus, it became a perfect counter-ambush tonight. The battle lasted until the 4th watch. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, it finally ended. The fire in the valley had mostly been extinguished, turning into wisps of smoke that rose into the air. Countless charred or blood-stained corpses were strewn all over the valley. The battle in front of the mountain had also ended. The scene was extremely tragic. Countless corpses from both sides were mixed together. Many were still in the state of battle, gouging out each other's eyeballs, biting each other's throats, their eyes wide open and tangled together. But in general, the Zhou army had the advantage of the ambush, and the Khitans were unable to use their best mounted archery, so their casualties were several times that of the Zhou army. Great General, the battle on my side has ended. Ma Qiao, Chu Yi, Li Mulan, and the other generals excitedly gathered around Li Duozhua. Everyone was covered in blood, some from the enemy, some from themselves. Chu Yi's face was even blackened by the thick smoke in the valley. Even Li Duozhua himself had used his saber to kill the enemy in the chaotic battle. His robes were stained with blood, and his armor was slightly crooked. Only Yang Fan, who probably only had some dirt on his sleeves, stood out from the rest. Haha, delightful, delightful. This battle I fought really delightfully. The resentment of Yellow Deer Valley has finally been vented a little. Although Li Duozhua was over 50 years old, he was in high spirits like a young man. A night of killing did not make him feel the slightest bit tired. Instead, he was full of energy, but the murderous aura between his brows had intensified. All soldiers who can fight, gather immediately. We will attack Horse City immediately. Yang Fan was slightly shocked. He did not want to suffer another defeat immediately after a great victory. He hurriedly advised, "Great General, the soldiers have fought for half a night and have lost a lot of strength. Moreover, I'm afraid the news here has already been reported back by the Khitans. If we attack Horse City now, I'm afraid it will be difficult to achieve the effect of a surprise attack." Li Duozhua said, "Don't worry, Colonel Yang. I have not forgotten myself because of this battle. We have fought for a night. Didn't the Khitans also fight for a night in Horse City? Our morale is high, but it is far from what they can compare. In terms of the strength of both sides, there is not much difference. Maybe they have already received the news that a surprise attack will not be effective. But in the next battle, I want to defeat the Khitans fair and square." Li Duozhua's broad hand landed heavily on Yang Fan's shoulder. "Colonel Yang, this is a good opportunity. We must win this battle fair and square. The significance of this battle is far greater than eliminating this enemy. Do you understand?" Yang Fan understood and nodded vigorously. Ma Qiao said, "Great General, what about the surrendered soldiers over there?" Li Duozhua's eyes sharpened. He said coldly, "In this battle, do not take any prisoners. After dealing with them, we will move out immediately." Chapter 746. While Li Duozhua was determined to take advantage of the victory to rebuild the morale of the Zhou army and inject the morale of the Zhou army into Hebei, Wu Yizhong had just arrived at Zhaozhou with his army. With Lu Shirda and Shatsa Zhongyi as the vanguard, Wu Yizong sent his army to Hebei first. He used the excuse that the gathering of troops was too slow and waited for Lu Shurta and Shatsongmi to lead the vanguard into battle in Hebei. He assumed that there was no longer any danger before sending his army. Zhaozhou was first attacked by the Khitans and then looted by the Turks. Now it was a wasteland and the businesses in the city had withered. Before the Turks retreated, they had killed a large number of the young men and women they had kidnapped from Zhaozhou. Countless families lost their children and were filled with grief. Wu Yizong's army of more than 100,000 marched majestically into Zhaozhou. When the people of Zhaozhou saw them, although they had wooden expressions, they still felt some comfort in their hearts. Although the army of the imperial court came late, it was better than not coming at all. No matter how much pain they had experienced, life had to go on. Now that such a large army of the imperial court was stationed here, Zhaozhou could finally be at peace. Wu Yizong was short and small, and his back was bent, wearing the radiant armor. He did not look valiant, and instead made him look even uglier, wretched. The provincial governor of Zhaozhou had already committed suicide when the Turks attacked the city. Many other officials either committed suicide or were killed. There were also those who escaped. Because they had abandoned the city and fled, they did not dare to return. Right now, the people waiting in front of the magistrate's office were some small officials who had survived the previous battle by hiding among the people. Wu Yizong was short and small. Although the horse he rode was not tall, when he reached the magistrate's office and pulled the stirrups, his short legs could not touch the ground no matter what. Wu Yizong's face reddened, and he could not help but scold his personal guard. "Idiot! Quickly help me get off the horse!" The personal guard hurried over and knelt on one knee to support Wu Yizong. He let Wu Yizong step on his thigh before he smoothly landed on the ground. The officials of Zhaozhou hurried forward to welcome him. Wu Yizong proudly said, "Hebei is plagued by bandits. His Majesty is worried about the people of Hebei and sent me to suppress the bandits. I have arrived at Zhaozhou today and will only stay here for 2 days to reorganize. I will then continue north to attacking Zhou and suppress the bandits." The officials quickly complimented, "Great General, it has been a long journey and it must have been tough. With the great general's mighty army, Zhaozhou will no longer have to worry about being harassed by bandits. Zhaozhou with great general's army and will no longer have to worry about bandits. Today, I have specially prepared some wine to welcome the great general. Great General, please." Wu Yizong smiled proudly. Just as he was about to step into the residence, a junior colonel with a red flag on his shoulder flew over. He fell off his horse and knelt down on one knee. He cupped his fists and shouted, "Report! Wu Wu and to Wu, Wu to Wu Zong. He Wu 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 Zhou." Wu to Yizong Zong smiled. Wu 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 smiled and said. Wu Yizong calmly stood his ground and said in disdain, "Just a few thousand enemies, just a bunch of clowns. How dare they be so arrogant in front of me? Humph. I point of Zhou, they will. I point, where is Jizhou? How far is it from Zhaozhou?" Without waiting for the general to explain the situation, a Zhao state official hurried forward and explained to Wu Yizong. Wu Yizong thought that with Lu Shurta and Shatsa's loyalty, the Khitans would not be able to come into contact with him. But when he heard that Jizhou was only 200 li away from Zhaozhou and could be reached in a day, his face changed. He shouted, "How can a few thousand Khitans dare to attack Jizhou? There must be a large force behind the Khitan cavalry. Send the order. Retreat to Xiangzhou and build a defense." At Wu Yizong's order, not only were the Zhaozhou officials stunned, even the generals in his own army were dumbfounded. Only a few thousand Khitan cavalry have appeared, and they are still in Jizhou. This General Wu, who has just entered Zhaozhou, is going to lead more than 100,000 soldiers from Hebei to Hunan? The Right Leopard Guard General He Jiami, as the deputy marshal, advised uneasily, "Great General, the enemy only has a few thousand cavalry, while we have 100,000 troops. Even with manpower, we can crush them." This general thinks that the Khitan cavalry does not know that our army has arrived, which is why they dare to harass Jizhou. We should quickly send a force to Jizhou and destroy them while they are unprepared. Wu Yizong said angrily, "Fool! Chao Rinshi and Wang Xiaojia are as arrogant as you, which is why they suffered successive defeats and suffered heavy losses, causing the court to lose face. This general has always been prudent in commanding troops and pays particular attention to advancing step by step. How can we repeat their mistakes?" He Jiami said, Then we will station in Zhaozhou. If the Khitan army attacks, we have enough troops to defend. Wu Yizong said, "Zhaozhou has been repeatedly attacked by the Khitans and the Turks. The city is already in ruins. It is not a good place to defend." Marching Major Zhang Yuanyi puffed out his large belly and came forward to suggest, "Great General has an army of more than 100,000. How can you flee at the mere sight of a few thousand enemy troops? The enemy troops do not have supplies and rely on plundering to survive. If our army fortifies the walls and clears the fields, the enemy troops 10 times their number will also retreat. Naturally, Zhaozhou will not be besieged for long. When the enemy troops retreat, our army will give chase and obtain a great victory." Zhang Yuanyi's words flee at the mere sight of a gust of wind made Wu Yizong's face turn red. He angrily shouted, "If we fall into the enemy's trap and lose our 100,000 troops, can you, Zhang Yuanyi, bear this loss? Reverse current towed. Don't be noisy in front of this general. Pass down my order, immediately move to Xiangzhou and set up defenses. Those who disobey will be executed." Zhang Yuanyi's appearance was nothing special. He had a big belly, thick and short legs, and the fat on his neck was so thick that his neck could not be seen. Moreover, his eyes were bulging out, making him look like a giant toad that was swimming upstream. That was how he got his nickname. In his anger, Wu Yizong did not care that he was in the army and directly called him by his nickname. He then flicked his sleeves and left. Wu Yizong hurriedly walked out of the mansion and had his personal guard help him climb onto the back of a horse. Like a wisp of smoke, he left the Zhaozhou government officials and Wu Yizong's many generals standing there dumbfounded. This, Zhang Yuanyi was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He could not help but look up to the sky and let out a sorrowful laugh. He recited, "The long bow is short, the arrow is short, the shoe horse is short of steps, going 700 li to the enemy, fighting alone against the wall, suddenly encountering the enemy, riding a pig to the south." Zhang Yuanyi had an unforgiving temperament. Although the opponent was a Wu prince and a great general, he could not help but make a limerick in his anger. What he meant was, "The bow in your hand is long, but the arrow you shoot is close range. Although the Sichuan horse is short, you still need to find a step to ride it. The enemy is already 700 li away, but you are still circling around the city walls pretending to fight. If you really encounter the enemy, you will ride a pig to the south." Commander Luo Jiu asked in bewilderment, "Why did you ride a pig and not a horse?" Zhang Yuanyi sneered, "As soon as I heard that the enemy had arrived, I was so scared that I wet my pants and ran away with a SI homophonic sound, sh*t in my mouth. How could I care about riding a horse?" When the generals heard this, they could not help but roar with laughter. Although He Jiami was also angry at Wu Yizong's incompetence, he could not allow them to humiliate the commander-in-chief in front of him. With a dark expression, he said, "Shut up! What a disgrace to talk and laugh like this." Luo Jiu asked, "General He, what should we do?" He Jiami said, "What else can we do? A military order is like a mountain who dares to disobey. Let's go." He Jiami stormed out angrily, leapt onto his warhorse, and chased after Wu Yizong. The other generals sighed and followed him out, leaving only the officials of the Zhaozhou government standing there, watching the pig-riding general leave with an indescribable expression on their faces. At first, Wu Yizong was only trying to find an excuse to avoid battle, saying that he suspected the thousands of Khitan cavalry were only the vanguard and that there was still a large army behind them. But when he really began to retreat, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. Wu Yizong remembered the complete annihilation of Chao Rinsher's army and Wang Xiaojie's death on the spot, and could not help but be alarmed. Why did the main Khitan force appear in Jizhou? Could it be Lu Shirda and Shotza's loyalty are also finished? If that's the case, once the Khitans arrive, my life will be over. Thinking of this, Wu Yizong's expression immediately changed. He suddenly reined in his horse and said, "Men!" He, Jiami, Zhang Yuanyi, and the others were dejectedly following behind him. When they saw him suddenly stop his horse, they could not help but feel their spirits rise, thinking that this pig-riding general had made up his mind to fight. But then they heard Wu Yizong shout, "Why is the army advancing so slowly? Once the enemy arrives, we will not have a way out. Pass on my order, abandon all supplies, and march at full speed to Xiangzhou." When Wu Zetian received the news of Li Duozue's great victory, she was wild with joy. Li Duozue had completely annihilated the 3,000 garrison troops at Pingjia-ao, burned their provisions, and wiped out nearly 6,000 Khitan soldiers lying in ambush. Then he immediately moved his troops to Ma City and defeated the besieging enemy troops, forcing them to flee in panic. This was the first great victory they had obtained after dispatching 4 armies in a row into Hebei. Naturally, Wu Zetian was incomparably happy. More importantly, Li Duozue had foiled the Khitan strategic plan. This was more important than the annihilation of 100,000 soldiers. Wu Zetian immediately issued a commendation and ordered Wu Yi to hand over his military power and temporarily be under Li Duozue's control. She finally understood that this nephew of hers was not cut out to lead troops into battle. Before her joy had faded, she received a memorial of impeachment from the officials of Zhaozhou, accusing Wu Yizong of fleeing without a fight. Not only did he flee, he even abandoned a large amount of provisions along the way. In the end, the several thousand Khitans who arrived the next day picked up a large amount of supplies along the way, and Zhaozhou was once again lost. This was because the more than 100,000 soldiers of the imperial court had abandoned the city and fled, breaking the hearts of the people and civilians of Zhaozhou. With no one to defend the city, why would they fight? Why fight? When the several thousand Khitan horsemen arrived, the remaining forces in the city and the countless commoners all left the city and went their separate ways. This impeachment memorial was written in blood by the officials of Zhaozhou, who were determined to perish together with the city. As Wu Zetian read this memorial, she gently closed her eyes. After a long time, tears gently flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Shanghai Wanner worriedly asked, "The saints?" Wu Zetian sadly said, "Qingxi is sick. Sanxi is also sick. It is better to close the city and not fight." Yizong fled at the sight of the wind, unable to be helped up. Both of them are unable to be helped up. I really want to support the Wu family. I really want the Wu family to pass on the legacy of Zhou for generations to come. But Wu Zetian's lips trembled for a long time before she calmed down. A bitter smile of self-mockery escaped from the corners of her lips, and she murmured in a somewhat hollow voice, "Perhaps I really should return the power to the Li family. I have no choice, no choice." Chapter 747. In the stable of a large carriage shop in Horse City, Khitan soldiers hung upside down from the thick beams. Whips whistled across their bodies and faces. Their leather robes had already been stripped off, leaving their clothes in tatters. The ground was littered with pieces of clothing, all stained with blood and frozen into sparkling ice flowers. Some of them had already fainted. When the whips landed on their bodies, they only twitched instinctively and no longer screamed. The Zhou army splashed salt water on them. When they quickly woke up and screamed, they raised the whips in their hands again and lashed down ruthlessly. The Zhou army had suffered many losses at the hands of the Khitans. The soldiers under Li Duozue were survivors of a disaster and would not be polite to the enemy. More than one Khitan had already died under their whips. The dead were thrown on the snow outside the stable and frozen together, turning into a hard, blood-red, strange object that looked like a carving. I confess, from time to time, someone could not withstand the endless and bone-piercing pain of the whips and weakly cried out for mercy. Although the whips were the simplest form of punishment, it was enough to make even the strongest person collapse when it was continuously applied to the body. Those who begged for mercy would be quickly untied from the roof and then dragged like dead dogs into a large wooden house with 6 braziers burning. It was as warm as spring. There were a few low tables in the wooden house, and a scribe sat at the side, recording statements. In front of them sat a scout with a ferocious smile on his face. It was Yang Fan's idea to use a scout as the chief interrogator. Most of these illiterate soldiers were thick-skinned. If they were asked to interrogate, they would probably miss out on a lot of useful information. This was the job of a scout. Even an illiterate man would become very sensitive in this aspect. There was more than one similar hut. All of them were used as interrogation rooms. All the interrogation records were gathered in a study in the front residence, and Yang Fan was here. All the records were gathered here for him to sort, summarize, and analyze. Right now, Yang Fan was serving as Li Duozuo's military advisor, a military strategist. Yang Fan continuously sorted out the confessions of every Khitan he gathered. These Khitan people were all captured in the Battle of Ma City, and there were also some small leaders among them. After sorting out and analyzing everything they knew and cross-referencing each other, it was very easy to eliminate the false information and obtain more reliable information. From this information, it could be seen that the Khitans were just as they had analyzed. They planned to first take Horse City and then 1,000 Gold Smelting City. Then they would immediately pull back to block Lu Shurta and Wu Yui's army from the north and south. They would use their advantage in mobility to quickly rush back and seize Lulong, thus forming a base with their lair in Yingzhou. This only confirmed Yang Fan's analysis. Now that they had foiled the enemy's eastern campaign, this information was no longer as important. More importantly, Yang Fan learned from the Khitan statements that when the Khitans were formulating the strategy, they had already sent people to the Turks to negotiate an alliance. It was clear that the Khitan string of victories, especially the 2 major defeats of the Zhou army and the reactions of Wu Yui and Wu Yizong, had made them very optimistic about their plan to seize Horse City, occupy 1,000 Gold Smelting City, and establish a base. They had not paid any attention to Li Duozuo's remnant army. Once this plan succeeded, regardless of whether the Turks agreed to form an alliance with them or not, it would be in the Khitans' interest to unite the northeast and establish a stable base. After reaching this conclusion, Yang Fan immediately rushed to the commander's tent with the information he had obtained and reported it to Li Duozuo. Li Duozuo's commander's tent was set up in this carriage shop, and the various personnel bustled about, some of them constantly marking something on the crude map. There were also people signing all kinds of official letters, and couriers hurried in and out. The moment Yang Fan entered, several high-ranking officers stood up and politely greeted him. Li Duozuo had a very diverse group of soldiers under his command, but whether they had once been domineering border army officers, arrogant imperial army officers, or prefectural army officers who had always reigned supreme in their own territory, they were all extremely respectful to Yang Fan. This was because they knew that this young man was the key to this great victory. The people in the army could refuse to submit to anyone, but to those with strength and merit, they could not refuse to submit. Compared to them, it was the ordinary soldiers and low-ranking officers who did not understand Yang Fan's role in this battle and turned a blind eye to his entrance. After politely greeting them, Yang Fan walked into Li Duozuo's room. "Congratulations, great general! Congratulations, great general!" As soon as Yang Fan entered, he saw Ma Qiao, Chu Yi Limolan, and the other officers cupping their fists to Li Duozuo. With a smile on his face, Li Duozuo waved his hand at the crowd. All right, it's just that Great General Wu is not feeling well, so I'm temporarily in command. It's not like I'm getting a promotion, but I'm mobilizing the troops, which will be of great help to us in the upcoming battle. I hope that everyone will work together with me to reclaim the prestige of our court with swords and victory. We are willing to serve the great general. We pledge our lives to the great general. As soon as Yang Fan opened the door, the noise from the outside room drifted in. There were people counting soldiers, calculating provisions, sending and receiving official documents, and asking the local government to send strong men to help set up defenses. The people speaking were all in different accents, some coarse, some soft, but all of them were uniformly high-pitched, as if they were shouting from the throat. As soon as Yang Fan closed the door, the thick curtain blocked out the sound, but everyone could already see him. Li Duozhua smiled. Our meritorious subject has arrived. Seeing everyone's happy expression, Yang Fan couldn't help but smile. It seems there's a joyous occasion? Ma Qiao rushed to say, Brother Fan, the court has ordered that the great general will be in charge of all military affairs in the Northern Army. At the same time, someone has been sent to Wu Yi with an imperial edict, asking him to hand over his military power and let our great general command the entire army. Oh, hearing this, Yang Fan was also overjoyed. The so-called rewards and promotions after the battle were not attractive to the officers in the midst of a dangerous battle. If they lost the next battle, all of this would be for naught. If they died on the battlefield, it would be even more meaningless. At this time, a capable and prestigious commander or a group of reinforcements was what they needed the most. Whether it was Wu Yizong, who was mocked by the Southern Army as the pig-riding general, or Wu Yi, who was called the tortoise-shell general by the Northern Army, they had lost all their prestige in the army. Wu Zetian's plan to establish the prestige of the Wu clan's descendants in this battle had completely failed. Wu Zetian had outsmarted herself this time. If she had not allowed her nephews to lead troops into battle, no one would have been sure if they had the ability to do so. But this time, even a normal soldier and his comrades had used extremely harsh words to mock them. It could be said that they had lost all their foundation in the army. Yang Fan hurriedly congratulated Li Duozhua. Li Duozhua was very happy, but he forgot that no matter how many battles he fought or how many contributions he made, his military power could not be above Wu Yi's. Moreover, Wu Yi had temporarily given up his military power because of his illness. The battle was fought by him. If he lost, it would be his responsibility. If he won, Wu Yi would still be credited. Moreover, Wu Yi would always be his immediate superior. Wu Yi had lost face. Although it was Wu Zetian's order, Wu Yi would definitely vent his anger on him. Yang Fan congratulated him. Then his expression turned serious. Great General, I have sorted out the chitin statements and obtained very important news. Li Duozhua heard this and immediately calmed down. He hurriedly waved his hand for everyone to stop talking and said, Everyone sit down. Officer Yang, tell me what you have found. Yes. Yang Fan sat down beside Li Duozhua and said seriously, There are two pieces of news, one good news and one bad news. Which one should Great General listen to first? Li Duozhua was startled. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. You brat, what are you playing at in the marshal's tent? If you have something to say it quickly. Ma Qiao interrupted. Let's talk about the good news first. Li Duozhua was from the Bayan. When he was still the young tribe leader of the Bayan, he had participated in the tribe's affairs. They did not have the strict laws of the imperial court of the Central Plains. The hierarchy of the same rank was not strict, and they paid little attention to etiquette. Li Duozhua's subordinates had many of the tribe's habits. Therefore, his subordinates were not afraid and were more casual in front of him. Yang Fan said, The good news is Li Jinzhong is dead. The tent immediately quieted down. After a moment of silence, the generals were in an uproar. Is this true? Li Jinzhong is really dead. The imperial court won another battle? Who killed Li Jinzhong? Silence. Li Duozhua berated. The room immediately quieted down again. Li Duozhua stared at Yang Fan with bright eyes and said, "Continue." Li Duozhua saw that when Yang Fan was talking about Li Jinzhong's death, there was no happy smile on his face. He knew that the worry he was talking about was probably even more serious than Li Jinzhong's death. Therefore, he became even more anxious. Yang Fan said, when Li Jinzhong was setting up an ambush to deal with Chao, Renshi, and Grand General Chao's troops, he was shot by an arrow in Yellow Deer Valley. After that, because of the successive battles, the wound was not able to recuperate. Coupled with his old age, he finally burned out. Before General Wang Xiaojie led the army north, Li Jinzhong was already dead. San Wanrong was worried that the news of Li Jinzhong's death would shake the morale of the army, so he kept it a secret. He pretended that the Khan was sick and needed to return to the mountains to recuperate. He himself led the main force and set up an ambush in East Gorge Stony Valley again, obtaining a great victory. Li Duozhua immediately understood the crux of the problem. He said, "In other words, Li Jinzhong's death can no longer cause a blow to the Khitans." Yang Fan nodded his head and said, "That's right. However, the Khitans are still keeping it a secret. After the great victory, they only announce the news to their own people, using the prestige of the great victory to dilute the impact of this matter. The reason why they did not announce it to the public was because they did not want to raise the morale of the imperial court." Ma Qiao said loudly, "Then let's announce it. Together with the great victory in the Battle of Maoqing, we can raise the prestige of the imperial court." Li Duozhua said, "This matter naturally has to be done, but Yang Xiaowei, the worry you mentioned, what is it?" Yang Fan said in a deep voice, "The Khitans have sent a group of soldiers to the east and a group of messengers to the west. The group heading east has already been defeated by us. As for those heading west, if their mission is successful, their strength will instantly increase by several times." Chapter 748. Li Mulan said, "They will not succeed. The imperial court has already agreed to their conditions. They are preparing to hand over the surrendered states of Hekou 6 prefectures to them." Chu Yi sneered. "The population of Hebei is 10 times that of the surrendered states of Hekou 6 prefectures, and their wealth is 100 times that of Hekou 6 prefectures. Comparing the two, which one is fatter? More importantly, the imperial court did not agree to cede the Chanyu protectorate to them. If they can take over Hebei, how is it compared to the temptation of returning the surrendered states?" Li Mulan did not say anything. Ma Qiao said anxiously, "Great General, you should send someone to report this news to the emperor and ask him to make a decision." Li Duozhua slowly sat down on his seat. Finally, his buttocks sank, and he sat firmly on his seat. He solemnly said, "What can the imperial court do? Cede the Chanyu protectorate? Even if the imperial court is willing to cede the Chanyu protectorate, it is not as tempting as Hebei. With the greed of the Turks, once the imperial court gives in, they will see through the imperial court and ask for more. Moreover, the Turks and the Khitans have been fighting for a long time, so they did not expect the Khitans to ally with them. But this time it is different. The Khitans proposed an alliance, and the Turks will most likely agree. It is too late. They have already sent messengers. Before the imperial court can think of a solution, before the imperial court can send messengers to them, before we can even send the news back to the imperial court, the Turks will already be in Hebei." All the generals looked at each other. The joy brought by Li Jinzhong's death was gone. The room was silent for a while. Yang Fan suddenly said, "Why don't we try something? Maybe it is already too late, but even if there is only a sliver of hope, we should still try." Li Duozhua raised his head and massaged his temples tiredly. He asked softly, "What can we try?" Yang Fan said, "We can also send messengers." Ma Qiao was surprised. "Why should we send messengers?" Yang Fan said, "War is not only decided by the outcome on the battlefield. Although I am not good at the art of war, I know that Sun Tzu once said, "The first is to attack the enemy. The second is to attack the enemy." Ma Qiao blinked. He didn't understand. It wasn't just him. Chu Yi and Li Mulan also didn't really understand. It was fine for them to charge and break through enemy lines. It was also fine for them to command battle. Even if they were illiterate, they had spent their whole lives in the army and had some knowledge from actual combat experience. However, they didn't understand the higher level things. Li Duozhua pondered and sorted out his thoughts. At the same time, he explained to his trusted subordinates, "It is impossible to use military tactics, strategies, politics, economy, culture, diplomacy, and other means to resolve the signs of war before the conflicts between the two parties escalate beyond control." Yang Fan nodded his head. Even though the Turks are a country, they are no different from a larger bandit den. They only have profit in their eyes. It is difficult to use gentle methods to subdue a monster that is not a country, especially when we are at a disadvantage. Li Duozhua said, "The second is to attack the enemy. When the two parties have reached the stage of conflict and are likely to enter the stage of using military force, we have to show our strength and confidence in victory to make the enemy feel that we are unbeatable. Then we can use diplomatic means to negotiate and achieve our goal without resorting to military force." Yang Fan said, "Once we enter the stage of war, we will immediately be attacked from two sides. Perhaps not just two sides. If the Shi people see that the Turks are involved, it is very likely that they will be emboldened. In order to fight for more benefits, they will send their troops south. And the Tubo people will not let go of this good opportunity. For the time being, they will put aside their internal conflicts and come here to take a share. So we can only attack the enemy now." Li Duozhua smiled bitterly. "How do we attack the enemy? Do we have the right to send messengers to the Khitans? If they raise any conditions, what right do we have to represent the court to agree or reject? If we send a letter to the court first, we may not make it in time." Yang Fan thought for a while and said, "We do not have the right to negotiate. What if we send someone to urge them to send troops to disrupt the Khitans' retreat? The condition for the court to return the Heku 6 provinces is for them to send troops to help the court in attacking the Khitans. They have not sent troops yet. Since the great general is in charge of the northern military, you have the right to send someone to coordinate the dispatch of troops?" Li Duozhua thought for a while and nodded, saying, "This reason is plausible. However, the Khitans have given them a condition that they cannot refuse, and they will definitely be tempted. If we send someone to urge them to send troops, will they agree?" Yang Fan also came up with this idea on the spur of the moment. Hearing this, he could not help but frown. The generals in the tent were thinking hard. Although Chu Yi and the others did not have the foresight to focus on diplomacy, when it comes to these specific matters, they still have to rely on their own experience to think of a solution. Ma Qiao thought for a while and muttered to himself, "That is, unless the Khitans are on the verge of collapse and the Turks know that there is no benefit in helping them, then they will turn to help us. This way, the court can return the Heku 6 provinces to them according to the agreement, and we can also get some benefits from the Khitans. They're not only poor, but they also lack manpower. Walking in the vast grasslands for half a day, you will not see many people. Whether it is livestock or people, they need them." Chu Yi snappily rolled his eyes at him and said, "Are you dreaming? If the Khitans are on the verge of collapse, do we still need them to send troops? What an idiot." Ma Qiao's face turned red, and he argued, "I am just making an assumption. If not, will the Turks stand on our side?" Chu Yi said, "What's the use of making an assumption? You are such a fool." While the two were arguing, Yang Fan suddenly slapped his thigh and shouted, "Good idea!" Everyone was stunned. Chu Yi and Ma Qiao stopped bickering and asked together, "You've thought of a way?" They all believed that Yang Fan was resourceful. He may not be as smart as Zhuge Liang, but compared to them, he should have some brains. Yang Fan pointed at Ma Qiao and said, "It is his idea." When Ma Qiao heard this, he grinned and said, My brother is my brother. At the critical moment, you know how to help me. Chu Yi said unhappily, Officer Yang, are you joking? How do we use his idea? Yang Fan laughed. It is to let the Turks think that the Khitans are on the verge of collapse. Chu Yi said, if the Khitans are on the verge of collapse, there is no need for the Turks to send troops. If there is a need for the Turks to send troops, it proves that the imperial court cannot handle the Khitans. Why would they believe us? This idea is feasible. Li Duozhua said in a deep voice, all is fair in war. There must be a way to make them believe. Officer Yang, what idea do you have? Yang Fan said, I have an idea, but I have not thought it through thoroughly. Great General, please allow me to think about it. Li Duozhua said, listening to what you said, I have an idea. Yang Fan knew that although he had many wonderful ideas, he was not familiar with the basic knowledge of the battlefield. There would always be loopholes in the plans he came up with. Li Duozhua would not make such mistakes. He could make up for the loopholes and turn his ideas into a perfect and executable plan. Yang Fan immediately asked excitedly, Great General, what idea do you have? Li Duozhua said, Tell the Turks that we have surrounded the main force of the Khitans, but it will take some time to eliminate them. Because they have a large amount of rations, there is no need to worry about food shortage for the time being. If we forcefully eliminate them, we will suffer heavy losses. So we want the Turks to fulfill their promise and attack the Khitans' retreat route. This will shake the morale of the Khitans and cause them to collapse without a fight. Yang Fan thought about it seriously and said, In this case, we need to mobilize the army to cooperate with the Turks to prevent the Turks from finding anything amiss. Li Duozhua nodded and said, This is not a problem. I am now in charge of the Northern Army and can mobilize the various divisions to cooperate with the envoy. Yang Fan said excitedly, If that is the case, this plan is feasible. Let us plan the details and fight, well, outside the battlefield. Since this plan has a possibility of success, all the generals were excited and sat together to discuss the plan in detail. Li Mulan said, In order to ensure the combat power of the Yulin Guard, the imperial court often rotates the new recruits to the border to fight with the border army against foreign enemies. I've been transferred several times to the border to lead these new recruits, so I have some understanding of the Turks and the Khitans. According to what I know, because of the frequent battles on the border, even though they are all small-scale battles with few casualties, the people of our border army and the Turkic tribes on the border view each other with great animosity. Some of the enmity between these tribes and villages can even be traced back to the previous dynasty, making it a mortal enemy. If we send the envoy, we may be hated by the tribes living at the border. Even if we do not kill the envoy, as long as we deliberately create obstacles to make it difficult for you to move, it will also spoil the plan. What we are fighting with the Khitans now is time. Li Duozhua said, I will think of a solution for this problem. What other difficulties are there? Chu Yi thought for a while and said, There is another problem. If the negotiation is successful, what do we do next? If the negotiation fails, what do we do next? We have to plan this beforehand. Where should we place our soldiers? Only when the Turks attack us will we be able to respond in time. Once the Turks send reinforcements, how can we quickly launch an attack and prevent the Khitans from using their advantage of having only cavalry and no supplies to escape? Li Duozhua slowly nodded his head and praised. Chu Langjiang has thought things through thoroughly. We cannot make a last-minute effort. If we fail to seize the opportunity after the negotiations, the Turks might turn around and work with the Khitans again. Write this down first. This matter must be resolved. Ma Chao saw that Chu Yi, this uncouth man, was able to look far into the future and was praised by the great general. He couldn't help but feel competitive. After thinking hard for a long time, he also said, There's another problem. Wu Yizong heard the news and retreated to Xiangzhou. This matter has already become a big joke that everyone in the north knows. Although he came back under the emperor's stern reprimand, He dilly-dallied and did not dare to engage the enemy. What should we do with this person? If he does not cooperate and continues to hide, the Turks only need to look at his behavior to know that we are lying. A smile appeared on Li Duozuo's face, and he nodded slightly, saying, "That's right. Even this general has forgotten about this point. We must think of a way to get Wu Yizong to move and have him cooperate with us. Otherwise, with an army of 100,000 under his command, there is nowhere to hide and nowhere to hide. He is like a living megaphone, constantly announcing the situation of the battle between us and the enemy. This problem must be resolved. Is there anything else?" Yang Fan did not expect that even though there was a possibility of his plan being implemented, there would be so many problems that needed to be resolved beforehand. He could not help but frown. Hearing Li Duozuo's words, the generals carefully thought it over and shook their heads. Seeing that no one was answering, Li Duozuo added, "There is one more thing, and it is also the most important thing." The generals pricked up their ears at this. Li Duozuo said, "We have done so much and paved the way. What is the goal?" "The goal is to persuade the Khitans to send out their troops and have them stand on our side so that we can deal with the Khitans together. But this matter is not easy, and we will encounter all kinds of problems. Making friends, all of these are just compliments. But the main point is still to make friends. This person responsible for negotiating with the Khitans is the most important. He must be able to deal with that old fox, Moshe, and the Khitan envoy. He must be able to adapt to the situation, have good eloquence, and be able to persuade the Turks. Where can we find this person?" The tent instantly fell silent. Yang Fan's frown deepened. After thinking for a long time, he could not think of a suitable candidate. After all, he had only been in the army for a short time and did not know many people. Just as he wanted to see if the others could think of a suitable person, he raised his head and saw that everyone, including Ma Chiao, were staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Chapter 749. On the vast and boundless grassland, a caravan of camels slowly approached. Further west from the low hills was the territory of the Tukis. The wind was blowing very fast, and the strong wind swirled the snowflakes all over the sky. The cold-resistant camels with 2 humps walked at a moderate pace. The people on the camels all lowered their bodies and wrapped their heads and faces tightly with thick scarves, only revealing a pair of narrowed eyes. Even so, the pervasive wind still carried snowflakes and pricked their bodies like needles. The temperature here was at least 10 degrees lower than in the wintertime of the Han. Yang Fan's entire body was wrapped tightly, and he wished he could find a condom to cover himself completely. After suffering in the wind and snow for more than 2 hours, he began to understand why the people of the cold regions were generally addicted to alcohol. Right now, he also wanted to fiercely gulp down a few mouthfuls of wine to ward off the cold. The despairing wind and snow covered the sky and covered the earth. Yang Fan originally thought that it would blow for 3 days and 3 nights, but suddenly the wind stopped. As soon as the wind stopped, the entire snowfield immediately calmed down, and the sky quickly turned pure blue. Such a pure blue could not be seen anywhere else. Soon after, white clouds began to appear one after another. They had a jade-like texture like newly picked cotton under the sun, dazzling white. Between heaven and earth, the caravan of camels was like an abstract stroke in a huge painting. Just a stroke placed in an unremarkable corner. In this vast and boundless world, it seemed so insignificant. The people in the caravan untied the snow-covered towels and relaxed to breathe in the fresh air. The pace of the camel's advance also abruptly increased. The scout leading the way suddenly said, "Commandant Yang, there is a shepherd family over there." Hearing the voice, Yang Fan looked over and saw that there was something strange about a snowy hill. After a closer look, he realized that it was actually a yurt. In a low voice, Yang Fan instructed, "Don't disturb them and don't make any fuss about nothing. Remember, we are now Khitans." The scout gave a sound of assent and urged the camel under him to gallop forward. The camel caravan continued to move forward. After changing a certain angle, Yang Fan finally saw the shepherd's door. There was an opening in the door, and the snow had piled up to half a man's height. The owner was climbing out of the opening and was about to clear away the snow on the roof and around the tent. Seeing the travelers, he placed his hand over his eyes to look at them and then called out to them. Yang Fan only knew simple Turkic and did not understand what he was saying, so he asked the scout, "What is he shouting?" The scout said that he would like to invite guests from afar to help him clear the snow. He is willing to entertain us with good wine and delicious mutton. Yang Fan thought for a moment and ordered, "Stop and rest here. Send a few people over to help. Be careful not to expose your identity." The scout acknowledged, and the entire caravan stopped. A dozen or so people jumped down from the hunchback and rushed toward the yurt. Looking at the yurt half buried in the snow, Yang Fan shook his head and said, "Their lives are really hard. This kind of winter." Yang Fan did not continue. It was true that their lives were hard. Perhaps this was also the main reason why they had been passed down from generation to generation. Regardless of whether it was the Di, Rong, Xiongnu, Turkic, or any other ethnic group, all the nomadic tribes had always treated the Central Plains as their supply station and target of invasion. However, invaders were invaders. Their greatest enemies were heaven and earth, wind and snow. Perhaps they were the greatest enemies of the farming of the Central Plains. Invasion and counter-invasion were the laws of heaven and earth, for the sake of survival. As a member of the Central Plains, Yang Fan could not express any sympathy for the enemy. The scout laughed in schadenfreude and said, "The snow in front of the yurt is several times thicker than where we are standing. It's like this on the grasslands. When the wind and snow come, it will cover the sky and earth. When there are obstacles, it will form a whirlwind, and the snow will accumulate there. The yurt is the same as the cave. It's also the easiest place for snow to accumulate. During the snowstorm, they can only rely on dried meat and cow dung to survive inside the yurt. Sometimes, when the snowstorm goes on for too long, the entire tent will be buried or even collapse. Then they will freeze to death. So, as soon as the snowstorm stops, they will immediately clear the snow on the top of the tent and around it to prevent the next snowstorm." Gu Zhuting suddenly came over and said with a smile, "But the mutton here is really good. You're in luck. The mutton is boiled in water with just a little salt. There is no need for any seasoning. The mutton is fresh and fragrant without the slightest smell. There are large patches of shallots growing on the grasslands here. The sheep here have been eating them since they were young, so naturally the smell of shallots is gone." Yang Fan glanced at her and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to know so much about the grasslands." Gu Zhuting smiled proudly. "Of course. Considering that the relationship between the herdsmen and the Han people in this area is too tense, it's fine if they encounter herdsmen who are alone in the grasslands. But if they encounter a large group of herdsmen who are gathered together for the winter, it may be disadvantageous to them." So Yang Fan and the rest disguised themselves as Khitans. Although the Khitans have a grudge with the Turks, most of the time the Khitans are the ones being bullied. So the hatred is mainly focused on the Khitans. Now that they are the Khitan envoys, it is not easy for them to be harmed by the Turks. The reason why Yang Fan touched his face the moment he saw Gu Zhuting is because his current face is completely different from that of another person. When Li Duozhua, Ma Qiao, and the rest all thought that he is the most suitable envoy, Yang Fan was really shocked and hurriedly declined. This is because he knows that his face is not suitable to meet the Turks. He is worried that he will encounter Musi, who looks exactly like him in the Turkic Khaganate. But if he does not go, there is really no one else who can carry out this important mission. Li Duozhua really can't find another suitable candidate. So Yang Fan reluctantly used Gu Zhuting's disguise skill. This disguise skill needs at most 2 days to be repaired. Otherwise, the cold and snow outside and the warmth and steam inside the tent will easily damage it and people will see through it. So, Yang Fan can only bring Gu Zhuting along. He forced Anu to stay in Tianjin Smelter. He does not want Anu to put herself in danger. Humans are always selfish. Seeing that he touched his face again, Gu Zhuting can't help but reveal a faint smile in her eyes. Don't worry, you won't be able to see through it. Yang Fan is still worried. Are you sure? My current appearance is really different from before, right? Can't you tell it all? The smile in Gu Zhuting's eyes deepens. Cough. When you were pretending to be Musi in the Turkic Khaganate, did you do something bad? Are you afraid that the creditors will come looking for you? Yang Fan's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly covered it up. No, I am worried that something big will happen. Yang Fan did not dare to continue talking to her and turned to look at the plains that have stopped snowing. On the plains, the stilled snow is like a frozen wave, forming all kinds of beautiful patterns. Looking at the masterpieces of nature, Yang Fan suddenly thought of the passionate grassland woman with a slim waist and long legs, Mu Hiyue. That alluring scene is really... Thinking of that scene, Yang Fan's heart skipped a beat, just like the ripples formed by the wind and snow on the snowy plains. This is a secret that can't be told to anyone, but occasionally thinking about it, it really has a special taste of excitement and temptation. At this moment, Ma Qiao, wearing a chitin leather robe and a dogskin ear cap, ran over and interrupted Yang Fan's charming reminiscence. Brother Fan, what do you think I should say when the time comes? Should I help you or should I say nothing? Ma Qiao took the initiative to ask to be the deputy envoy and accompany him on the journey. Along the way, Ma Qiao is always thinking about what he should say and do when the time comes, afraid that he will do something wrong and drag Yang Fan down. Yang Fan is very happy about this. His brother is no longer the muddle-headed youth of the past. He already knows how to do things seriously. Yang Fan's face is full of smiles, as bright as the sun that suddenly appears after heavy snow. You don't have to worry, just do as you please. It's fine even if you are more ostentatious than usual. Ma Qiao said worriedly, I'm afraid that something will go wrong and drag you down. Yang Fan patted his shoulder and said with a relaxed smile, Don't worry. The more casual you are, the more they will believe you. Moshe is just a lowly person. After reading Li Duozuo's letter, Wu Yizong was overjoyed and immediately ordered excitedly, Strike the drums, this marshal will raise the tent. In a flash, the drums sounded, and Wu Yizong gathered the generals and raised the tent, giving the order majestically. The entire army is to immediately move west and be stationed at the Shi, Lan, and Shuo prefectures. Hearing the order, the generals were all startled. They are already used to Wu Yizong's unconstrained style of fighting. Usually, when the enemy comes from the east, they will go west. When the enemy comes from the north, they will go south. Could it be that great Marshal Wu has heard some news and is planning to hide in the west? Zhang Yuani can't help but ask, Great General Wu, may I ask, why do we need to move to the Shi, Lan, and Shuo prefectures? Wu Yizong has been hiding from the Khitans all day, to the point that even he is a little embarrassed. He knows very well how his subordinates view him, but he can't do anything about it. Chao Renshi and Wang Xiaojie both have more soldiers than him. But what is the result? He doesn't dare to muster up the courage to fight the Khitans. Lu Shirda has fewer soldiers than him, but now he is fighting well. Li Duozuo has even fewer soldiers, but he has won a great battle. However, he believes that luck played a big part in this, and he doesn't dare to bet his life on luck. This time, Li Duozuo, as the marshal of the Northern Army, asked him to cooperate in the battle. In order to prevent the Khitans from fleeing west, he asked him to guard the western line and stop the Khitans from going west. The western line is the territory of the Turks, and Her Majesty the Empress has already agreed to return the Heku 6 prefectures to the Turks. In exchange, the Turks will cooperate with the Zhou army in the battle. He believes that under these circumstances the Khitans can't flee west, so guarding the western line is the safest. So far, he hasn't seen the Khitans flee west. Therefore, Wu Yizong immediately decided to cooperate with Li Duozuo. This way, he can justifiably avoid the battle, and who can laugh at him for being afraid of the enemy? Zhang Yuanyi asked one by one. And Wu Yizong immediately took out Li Duozuo's letter and confidently explained that, as the marshal of the Southern Army, he must resolutely cooperate with the Northern Army and shift the entire army to the Western line. The generals have nothing to say, now that Lu Shida and Li Duozuo are fighting well on the Northern line. Li Duozuo's request might really be necessary because of the change in the war in the north. Seeing that the generals have no objections, Wu Yizong excitedly arranged for them to depart on the same day and move to Lan Prefecture. Almost at the same time, the prefectures and counties of Hebei began to spread an exciting news. The Imperial Army has formed an encirclement around the Khitans, and the annihilation of the Khitan rebel army is just around the corner. The curtains of this special battle outside the Great Wall slowly began. Chapter 750. Snow swirled outside the tent, but the inside was bustling with activity. Several slaves sat in the corner of the tent, playing a cheerful tune. Several girls dressed in brightly colored Turkic clothing danced in the tent, the bells on their feet chiming pleasantly as they danced. The wind was not strong, and when the curtain was raised, pure white snowflakes drifted in, followed by a rich aroma. 2 burly men walked in with a golden roast lamb on their shoulders. Everyone in the tent was talking and laughing loudly while drinking wine from wooden bowls. Their oily big hands were grabbing zongpa, or they were using knives to cut large chunks of beef and mutton, putting them into their mouths and chewing. Sitting on the host's seat, Moshe drank fine wine and casually responded to the crowd. He smiled at the tribal leaders, a faint light flickering in his eyes. When he had invaded Halong, he had forced Wu Zetian to agree to the marriage, gifting her a large sum of gold, farm tools, ironware, seeds, and medicine. When he had gone to Hebei, he had captured countless grains, cloth, and money. Finally, he had forced Wu Zetian to make concessions, returning the surrendered tribes of the 6 Heku provinces to the Turks. This string of victories had allowed the tribes that had followed him to taste the true sweetness of victory, causing his supporters to grow, his prestige to grow, and the Turkic tribes to become even more united. The current Moshe was gradually surpassing his older brother's prestige. Moshe had originally believed that the imperial court of the Central Plains was not something he could swallow with his appetite. The foundation of this empire was too deep, and if he did not spend more than 100 years, it would never run out. Thus, he had always taken advantage of the situation and then left. However, Wu Zetian's repeated concessions made Moshe more and more courageous. He was like a crafty wolf, constantly probing his prey. The more his prey yielded, the more convinced he was that his prey was not strong, and his greed grew. At this moment, the Khitans sent an envoy. The Khitans wanted to work with him to divide up Hebei, which was exactly what Moshe wanted. He had seriously considered the Khitans' proposal for a very long time. He felt that the Central Plains Empire was still not something he could swallow with his current strength. But what if he only wanted to swallow Hebei? Of course, in this way, the Khitans would also grow stronger. He did not wish for another powerful nomadic tribe to appear beside his bed. Although the Central Plains Empire was powerful for countless years, the steppe had always been nomadic. No matter how powerful the Central Plains Empire was, how it could seal off wolf Jushu and force them to flee like rabbits on the steppe, the Central Plains Empire could not take root in the steppe desert. After a period of glory, the masters of this place would still be them. The real threat came from within, from other nomadic tribes. They, the Turks, were once a small tribe on this grassland and eventually replaced the once invincible Xiongnu. Who knew if a new tribe would replace them in the future? It was necessary to curb the growth of the Khitans. However, temporary cooperation should not be a problem. He was confident that with his strength and intelligence in this alliance, he could use the soldiers of Wuzhou to weaken the Khitans and vice versa. He could reap the benefits while paying the smallest price. Today, he had gathered all the tribe leaders to announce his decision. The centralization of power of the Turks was far less than that of the Central Plains Empire. Although he was currently the Khagan, possessed the largest tribe and territory, and all the tribes followed his lead if his plan did not fit the interests of the majority of the tribes. Most of the tribal leaders would object, and he could not act willfully. Therefore, he patiently chatted and drank with the crowd first. Seeing that the crowd was getting more and more excited, he thought about what to say. Then he grabbed a towel and wiped his greasy hands. He stood up and said with a smile, "Everyone, please be quiet. I have something to say." The moment Moshe spoke, the laughing tribe leaders quieted down and looked in his direction. The slave musicians in the corner of the tent also hurriedly stopped the music. A few young girls, their faces flushed and sweaty from dancing, waved their long sleeves, bowed, and retreated. Moshe said with a smile, "Previously, when we attacked Liangzhou, Lingzhou, and Xingzhou, all the tribes made a lot of money." "Huh. Seljuk, when we attacked Lingzhou, you didn't want anything else but those who were good at farming. You captured more than 2,000 serfs, and others laughed at you for being stupid. In my opinion, you are the smartest." Moshe pointed at his beloved general, Seljuk, and said with a smile, "This time we asked for a large number of grain seeds from Wuzhou. Next spring, you can let those serfs sow the land. By next winter, your tribe will be even more powerful, and you will no longer have to worry about the livelihood of your people. You have good foresight, good foresight." Seljuk raised his bowl of wine and said with a smile, "A stone's throw away from grasslands can only support one horse, but the crops in a stone's throw away can support dozens of families. At that time, I felt that instead of robbing some gold and silver, it was better to rob some slaves who could grow crops. Coincidentally, there was a piece of land in my territory that was suitable for farming. However, although I captured a lot of serfs, unfortunately I didn't have enough grain seeds and farming tools. Just when I didn't know what to do, it was Khan who took care of us and brought back so many farming tools, grain seeds, and farming books. It's all thanks to Khan's blessing. Our entire tribe will always remember Khan's kindness." Moshe smiled and waved his hand, saying, "I am Khan. All the tribes trust me, support me, and let my people live a good life. This is my responsibility, Moshe. There is no need to thank me." After saying that, Moshe turned to Chibikri and said with a smile, "I heard that you captured a pair of twin beauties in Zhaozhou. They are 14 years old and more beautiful than flowers. You have good luck with women. Do a good job and let them give birth to a few cubs for you. When they grow up in the future, our great prairie will have a few more heroes like you." Chibikri was a burly man in his early 30s. This person was brave in battle but clumsy with words. After hearing Mooch's words, he only chuckled and scratched the back of his head with a naive look on his face. His expression naturally caused the other tribe leaders to roar with laughter, and many people started to make fun of him. Moshe returned to his table and sat down, saying in a clear voice, "Today, I invited everyone here not only to drink and have fun, but also to discuss something with you." Everybody turned their gaze toward him. They quietly said, "The Khitan people have sent an envoy, inviting us to send troops to divide Hebei with them. After the matter is settled, Tan, Yuan, Yu, Mo, Ji, and other prefectures will belong to us, the only Wanning and Ping prefectures. What do you think?" The generals were stunned when they heard this. They whispered to each other and discussed it. Arrowhead Xiao Mumu cupped his hands and said, "Khan, let's take advantage of their unpreparedness and bite them. Although they are angry, it will be difficult for them to make up their minds to send troops to the desert. After all, if they send troops to the desert, even if it's just once, their consumption will be 1,000 times greater than what we captured. They can't afford it, but if we want to occupy their land, I'm afraid they won't let it go easily." Zhu Tu and Yabgu echoed, "Yes, Khan, our strength lies in galloping through the desert grasslands. Whether it is attacking or defending cities, it is not our forte. If we occupy Hebei, it will be difficult for us to resist the counterattack of the imperial army. Moreover, Hebei has just been plundered by us. There is no profit for the time being. In the heavy snow and cold winter, there is no need to go far." When the two leaders spoke, it was as if a hornet's nest had been poked. With a buzz, All the tribal leaders began to speak at once. Seljuk, Chibikri, and the other leaders who had tasted the sweetest benefits supported Moshe's idea, while Xiaomumu, Zhutu, and the other moderates expressed their opposition. As Mu-En and Moshe were in-laws, he was not willing to easily refute his opinion. However, Mu-En himself did not believe that with the current strength of the Turks, they had the ability to seize the territory of the Central Plains Empire. Thus, he adopted a compromise. He agreed to send troops again, but he did not agree to occupy it. He felt that there was no harm in attacking the fortified cities that they had not conquered yet and plundering more resources and people. He hoped that the Turks would immediately retreat to the desert after plundering, leaving the Khitans to deal with the infuriated Wuzhou imperial court alone. They could then sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, watching the Yuan Empire and the Khitans fight to the death. On this point, Lu Bugu agreed with him. Moose kept smiling and didn't say a word. No matter if they agreed, opposed, or tried to smooth things over, he just listened attentively. He wanted to find out what the leaders were really thinking and what their concerns were through their debates. Only when he understood everyone's thoughts did he clap his hands. The tent quieted down again. Moshe smiled and said, "I understand your concerns. You are worried that even if we occupy those cities, we will not be able to defend them. It is impossible for us to rule over the people there and become the rulers there. Sooner or later, we will have to return to the desert. Rather than wasting our efforts, it is better to capture the people and food and leave. Is that right?" Seeing Xiao Mumu, Zhu Tu, and the others nod, Moshe chuckled and said, "Actually, my original thoughts were the same as yours. Then why did I change my mind?" Moshe's gaze slowly swept across the crowd. Seeing that everyone was holding their breath and listening, he said, "Because I feel that the Wuzhou of today is no longer the Tang dynasty of the past. Is it really as strong as we imagine it to be?" Moshe raised his voice and said, "We conquered Liang, Lingzhou, and Shenzhou. We conquered their cities and captured their people. What was the result? We proposed a marriage alliance, and they agreed. They even sent silk, farming tools, seeds, steel, medicinal herbs, agricultural books, medical books, and many treasures. We marched into Hebei and conquered Gui, Tan, Ding, and Zhao states. We plundered countless treasures and killed tens of thousands of Tangs. What was the result? They promised to expel all the families of the 6 states that surrendered to them and return them to us. Why are they willing to do that? Have you ever thought about it? Let's talk about the Khitans. The small Khitans actually defeated their troops, one after another. This caused the soldiers that went to Hebei to defend their cities and did not come out. The Khitans moved unhindered in Hebei. Is this empire really that strong? The Khitan Li Jinzhong has already sent a messenger to me. He told me that they have won many battles and the Tangs are scared out of their wits. However, they are limited by their military strength. Just as Masua said this, an imperial bodyguard quickly walked into the tent and reported, "Reporting! A Khitan envoy has arrived and wishes to see the Khan." Moshe was startled. The Khitans sent another envoy. The various chiefs in the tent also whispered to each other and discussed. Moshe pressed his hands down and stopped the commotion. He said in a deep voice, "Let him in." The imperial guard immediately retreated and stood at the entrance of the tent. He shouted, "The Khan has ordered for the Khitan envoy to come in." Around the Khagan's tent, a fence had been erected in the snow to prevent the tribesmen from entering. In front of the tent there was an entrance. 7 or 8 Turkic warriors were standing there, sabers in hand. Across from them were 2 Khitans dressed in leather robes. With a shout from the entrance of the tent, the Khitans immediately moved to the left and right. The 2 Khitans then strode towards the tent. The 2 of them walked to the entrance of the tent with majestic gait. Suddenly, they pulled off their leather belts and untied their leather robes. With a stretch of their arms, the leather robes fell to the snow behind them. The Turkic warriors were stunned. Before they could react, the 2 of them had already entered the tent. Inside the tent, All the chiefs under Moshe are looking towards the entrance. With a flash of light, the two of them walked in side by side. One was dressed in scarlet robes, and the other in green. They wore boots and a leather belt around their waists. Around their waists was a brocade bodice. One was embroidered with a flying bear and the other with a rhinoceros. The two of them stood steadily at the entrance of the tent. Their gazes swept to the left and right before grabbing their furry dogskin ear masks and throwing them to the corner of the tent, revealing their soft hair wrapped in black muslin. More than half of the chiefs in the tent stood up and exclaimed in surprise, "These are not chitin messengers. They are obviously two Tang generals." Chapter 751. Noticing the abnormality, the Turkic warriors rushed into the tent. Seeing the appearance of the two, they could not help but be stunned. These two chitin envoys have been searched, and their weapons have been confiscated. The chitin proof they carried is also real. How did they suddenly become generals of the Wuzhou court? By now, Moshe has calmed down and sternly ordered, "All of you leave!" The tent is still full of discussion. Moshe frowned and said to them, "Quiet." Silence stopped the crowd and turned his head to look at the two of them. He saw that the two of them were very young, but one was dressed in scarlet and the other in green. He knew that the one dressed in scarlet was of a higher rank. He looked at him and asked, "Are you from Zhou?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "You must be Khan Moki? I did not expect Khan to be so fluent in Chinese." Moshe coldly snorted, "Why did you come all the way to my Khan's tent?" Ma Chiao knows that in terms of knowledge and ability, he is far inferior to Yang Fan. Therefore, he firmly remembered his brother's words and only did as he was told. Just be the same as usual. It is better to be more ostentatious than usual. Just as Moshe finished speaking, he glared at them and said in a rough voice, "I heard that Khan Moshe is a great hero of the Turkic steppe. How can you be so petty? We braved the wind and snow to come here, and you did not even invite us to a bowl of wine and a few pieces of meat to warm ourselves? Throughout our journey, even a lone herdsman stationed in the wilderness wouldn't be so rude to his guests. Insolence! How dare you speak to our Khan like this?" Immediately, the leaders of several small tribes on both sides jumped up to show their loyalty, pulling out their swords with a clang. Ma Chiao did not hesitate either. He glared at them and puffed out his stomach. The rhinoceros embroidered on his waist arched up and assumed a fighting stance. Moshe laughed loudly. "Give them a seat and serve the wine." Immediately, someone came forward and set up a table for Yang Fan and Moshe. They brought 2 bowls of wine and a plate of steaming roast lamb. Ma Chiao smelled it greedily, grabbed a piece, and without caring about how hot it was, he wolfed it down. Yang Fan sat beside him and drank a mouthful of wine. Disliking the taste, he slightly frowned and put it down. He took a knife from the plate and cut a piece of meat, dipped it in salt, and placed it in his mouth. He chewed slowly and looked at Moshe. Moshe was sitting cross-legged behind the table, with one hand supporting his chin. He was looking at them with interest. Seeing him raise his head, he smiled and said, "There is no hurry. Let us eat first." Yang Fan said, "Just now, when I was outside the tent, I heard the incessant chatter and laughter in the tent. There are many bold people on the prairie who do not like to eat quietly. When in Rome, do as the Romans do." The Moshe said, "Good. Then, can you answer this Khan's question now?" Yang Fan said, "The one beside me is Ma Chiao, the commander of the Longwu Guards." Ma Chiao puffed up his cheeks and chewed on a mouthful of lamb. He nodded at Moshe with grease dripping from the corner of his mouth. Yang Fan said, "As for me, I am the commandant of the Yulin Guards, goose shooting." Although Yang Fan was not a very prestigious figure in the bureaucracy of the Central Plains, he had done a few big things. He did not know if these Turks knew who he was and did not dare to take the risk. So he used Gu Zhuting's name. It's just that the Ting character was removed from the woman character. Moshe's eyes flickered and he asked, "Why are you two here?" Whose orders are you here on? Ma Chiao stuttered and interrupted. Great General Li Duozhua sent us here to urge Khan to follow the agreement with my country and send troops to cut off the Khitan's retreat. Moshe immediately replied, To tell you the truth, I braved the heavy snow to summon all the chiefs here today to discuss with them how to follow the agreement with your country to send troops to attack the Khitans. But because the weather is cold and marching is not easy, everything needs to be prepared, so there is no conclusion for now. At this point, Moshe pretended to be surprised and asked with concern, Why did your country's great general send you here in such a hurry? Did you suffer a great loss at the hands of the Khitans? Moshe said boldly, I am discussing a marriage alliance with your country's royal family, and we will soon become in-laws. We will soon be one family. I originally planned to send 20,000 cavalry into Hebei to participate in the war. But if the situation of the war changes and the Khitans become too powerful, then I might have to send tens of thousands more to help your esteemed country successfully quell the rebellion. Yang Fan secretly cursed the old fox. He exchanged a glance with Ma Chiao and suddenly burst into laughter. After Moshe finished speaking, the tent fell silent. All the chiefs pricked up their ears and carefully listened to what they were saying. Unexpectedly, the two did not refute or admit it, but laughed in unison. All the chiefs could not help but be stunned. Moshe also felt it was strange. He frowned slightly and said with displeasure, I have good intentions. What is so funny? Yang Fan waved his hand and said, Khan, do not misunderstand. We are not making fun of you. We are just listening to you talk about the situation of the Khitans, and laughed. Moshe's expression tensed up and he hurriedly asked, What is so funny? Yang Fan said, I am ashamed to say this. When our imperial army sent out troops to suppress the rebellion, because we underestimated the Khitans, we fell into their trap and suffered several defeats. Later on, the imperial court learned from this painful experience and sent Li Duozhua, Lu Shurda, Shachizhongi, and other experienced generals to command the battle. Now the war situation has been reversed, and the Khitans are on the brink of destruction. Li Duozhua was stationed in the capital and did not know much about the Turks. However, Lu Shurda and Shachizhongi had fought with them for most of their lives. With the two of them guarding Helong, the Turks had never gained any advantage against them. Naturally, they believed in their abilities and were 80% convinced when they heard this. This news had a great impact on the Turks, and there was another uproar in the tent. Mu En sneered, Is that true? If your country has already won a great battle, why did you send all of you here to urge us to send troops? Mu En's question made a lot of sense. The Khitan leaders immediately quieted down and listened to Yang Fan's explanation. Yang Fan glanced at Mu En and felt that he looked familiar. After taking a closer look, he suddenly felt guilty. So it's my cheap father-in-law. Looking at Mu En, Yang Fan thought of Mu Hiwe and the charming scene in the carriage. Yang Fan didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He hurriedly coughed and revealed a spurious smile. If the imperial court's army hadn't taken control of the situation in Hebei province, frankly speaking, our general Li wouldn't have urged you to dispatch your troops. Mu En frowned and asked, Why is that? The corner of Yang Fan's lips curled into a sneer, and he did not speak. The Turk leaders gradually understood, and their faces revealed embarrassed and angry expressions. Ma Chiao was still afraid that they didn't understand, so he grabbed another piece of lamb and drank a mouthful of the delicious gravy before saying, What? Can't you keep your face? Our commandant Gu was right? Huh. If we do not have the strength to retaliate, how would we dare to ask you to send troops? Wolves at the front door and tigers at the back door, it will not be comfortable. Seljuk slammed the table heavily, causing a bowl of wine to jump up and spill onto the table. Bastards! Are you tired of living? Do you think we Turks will not dare to send troops to teach you a lesson? Mok waved his hand to stop him, and his eyes were fixed on Yang Fan. He asked, Envoy, please explain. What is the situation in Hebei now? If you have really defeated the Khitans, why do you still want me to send troops? Yang Fan nimbly spun a piece of golden roasted meat with a knife, dipped it in salt, and stuffed it into his mouth. After chewing for a while, he picked up the bowl of wine and took a sip. When Chebakri and the others were getting impatient, he slowly said, "Our army set up an ambush in Horse City and defeated the Khitan army. We lost nearly half of their men and horses. In this battle, even the Khitan Khan, Li Jinzhong, was killed in action." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. For a long time, there was not the slightest sound coming from the tent. Yang Fan dared to say this because he had fully analyzed the mentality of the Khitan people. The Khitans first kept Li Jinzhong's death a secret until Sun Wanrong defeated the Zhou army in the Eastern Gorge and stabilized his position among the Khitans. Only then did they inform all the generals. They had to report it. The Khitan chief was not like the emperor of the Central Plains. If he was locked in the palace by his close officials and did not see them for a year or so, no one would be too suspicious. However, the Khitan chief usually interacted too often with his people and did not show his face for a long time. His people were bound to become suspicious and discover the truth. So Sun Wanrong used the momentum of his great victory to announce the truth of Li Jinzhong's death to them. It was also the best opportunity. However, they did not announce it to the outside world. They needed to continue suppressing Wuzhou in terms of momentum. Then what about the Turks? The Khitans and Turks were both wolves. Even if one was stronger and the other weaker, they were both wolves. They needed to cooperate, but also be on guard against each other. In order to prevent the insatiable Turks from demanding too much from them, the Khitans needed to create a strong image of themselves. Thus, they could not tell the Turks about Li Jinzhong's death. By the same logic, they could not tell them about the Khitans' great defeat at Horse City. As the Battle of Horse City took place not too long ago and happened in the coastal region of eastern Hebei, the Turks could not possibly know about it. Therefore, Yang Fan said it, and he was the first to say it. If he said it first, then even if it was a lie, it would be impossible for the Khitan envoy to verify it. The Khitans' previous concealment would cause the Turk generals to completely lose trust in them. No matter what they said, it would not be able to dispel the Turks' suspicions. With these words, the Khitan envoy, who was still unaware of the truth, was already at a disadvantage. Silently asking a few more questions, Yang Fan answered them fluently. Xiao Mumu was still doubtful and asked again, "Since the remaining Khitan troops have been surrounded by you, why do you still need us to send troops? Why did you come here so sneakily disguised as Khitans?" Yang Fan said proudly, "The situation in the north has always been well understood by our court. The people at the borders of our country have always been at odds with each other. There have been many fights and grievances between us. If we openly came as Zhou envoys, the tribes at the borders of your country would probably find trouble with us, right? Changing our appearance is just to pass through unimpeded. As for why we still need you to send troops, since we have already won." Ma Qiao seemed to be full. Just as Yang Fan said this, he wiped his oily hands, rubbed his belly, burped, and lazily continued. Chapter 752. Ma Qiao jeered, "We are different from you. We fight wars to spend money, but you fight wars to earn money. When we mobilize our troops, we expend a lot of money and rations. As for you, you fish whatever you can find, even digging out the things hidden in a rat's hole. This is a battle that you are suited to fight. In any case, it is winter and you have nothing better to do." This time, even Moshe's face darkened and he angrily retorted, "I, Moshe, am the Khagan of the Turks. Even your great general Li Duozwa has to maintain proper etiquette before me. Do you think that this Khagan's saber is not swift after all?" Yang Fan hurriedly cupped his fists. "Khagan, please do not blame me. Most of the men in the army are illiterate and boorish. But while my brother's words are crude, his reasoning is not. Urging Khagan, Moshe, to mobilize your troops is indeed an important reason." Even Moshe could not understand these words. his brows slightly furrowed. Moshe shot him an inquiring look. Straightening his back, Yang Fan solemnly said, I am a soldier. I believe that when dealing with an enemy, one should be unscrupulous. As long as it can deal a blow to him, it is good. If he is strong, we must fight. If he is weak, we must fight even more. If we do not take your life while you are weak, are we going to wait until you are strong enough to deal with you? These words were in line with the wishes of the Turkic leaders, and they all nodded their heads. Yang Fan said, This is not only my view, it is also the view of our soldiers. A pity. Shaking his head, Yang Fan regretfully said, A pity that our imperial court is too forgiving, especially when the enemy shows the slightest hint of fear and hands over a letter of surrender. The scholar officials in the imperial court can't wait to jump out and preach about mercy. The Khitans are capricious and ambitious. They even slaughtered more than 200,000 of our soldiers in the east and west valleys. We can't wait to exterminate them. However, after they were surrounded by us, they sent people to surrender. The great general did not dare to keep the letter of surrender and could only report it to the imperial court. I can foresee what the scholar officials in the imperial court will say next. Even if they do not plead for mercy on behalf of the Khitans, what will happen after we destroy this Khitan army? Yang Fan's gaze moved from Moshe's face to the Turkic generals. At that time, the imperial court will definitely not allow us to slaughter the old, weak, women and children of the Khitans. Moreover, the imperial court will definitely allocate grasslands for them to live, providing them with livestock and grain to appease them. The more Yang Fan spoke, the angrier he became. Although his expression was still as calm as water, the anger in his voice was gradually becoming uncontrollable. Therefore, he spoke faster and faster, and his voice became louder and louder. He seemed to realize that he was too agitated, so he hurriedly took a deep breath and calmed himself down. What he said was a mock chin. Part. The central Yangshan. Man. Of K. And the nobleman's concept of belittling profit made them feel ashamed to demand benefits from the defeated. The Turks felt this most keenly, so Yang Fan's words resonated with them. Masuar rubbed his chin and said thoughtfully, So, you want to use us to eliminate the Khitans? This is only one reason, Yang Fan said. The other reason is that although we have trapped the Khitans and their defeat is only a matter of time, if we attack, we will suffer heavy casualties. If we do not attack, the imperial court will become merciful and will release the tiger back to the mountain. Thus, the great general sent us to urge Khan Moshe to send troops to attack their retreat. As long as their base is eradicated, the Khitans will collapse without a fight. Moshe gave a crafty smile. Oh, but why should I agree? Since you are so frank, I might as well be frank. If I stand idly by, and the Khitans are forgiven by your imperial court, you will have left behind a powerful enemy on the northern frontier. If they are driven to desperation, they will try to weaken your strength. No matter what, it will be more beneficial to us, right? Moshe looked around, and the leaders all laughed knowingly. Without batting an eyelid, Yang Fan said, Indeed, it will be beneficial to you, but there are big and small benefits. If Khan sends troops, you will reap big benefits. If Khan does nothing, you will reap small benefits. Big benefits or small benefits, which one will Khan choose? Moshe's interest was piqued. Oh, tell me, what is big benefit and what is small benefit? Yang Fan said, This small benefit. Khan has already said that it will leave an enemy on the northern frontier for our imperial court or weaken our military strength. But once this enemy is strong, does Khan think that it will only threaten our imperial court? Compared to our imperial court and the nomadic Turks who live on the steppe, who will be under greater threat, if they are destroyed and weaken our military strength, with a large population of the Central Plains, we will only need a few years to recover. Moreover, regardless of this process, it is impossible for our imperial court to initiate a war with your country. Whether or not to start a war has always been up to your country. In Khan's view, which one is more beneficial to your country? When I say big benefit, there are both near and far benefits. The far benefit lies in destroying a tribe that has the potential to grow stronger and threaten the hegemony of the Turkic steppe. As for the near benefit, it is Khan sending troops to attack their base. Their base does not have many soldiers, so Khan can use the smallest price to achieve his goal. And if Khan wins, won't the wealth and women of the Khitans all belong to Khan? The steppe and desert are vast, and what they lack the most is population. If you are willing to send troops, not only can you seize all the wealth of their tribe, you can also obtain many women and children. And the steppe, I believe that none of you will reject this benefit, right? Yang Fan smiled as he looked at the Turkic leaders who were tempted. Moshe suddenly noticed the greed in the eyes of these leaders. Most of them were already tempted by this envoy of Wuzhou, and he couldn't help but curse. Only he could lead the affairs of the Turks. How could he allow someone else, especially an outsider, to influence the will of the Turks? Moshe immediately coughed and said, "This Khan already understands the reason for your visit. Sending troops is not a small matter. We need to discuss it first. Come, arrange a tent and invite the envoy of Zhou to rest." Yang Fan knew that this matter could not be rushed and he must not show any impatience. So he stood up, put his hand on his chest and bowed to Ma Xiao, and then left with the guards. Ma Xiao walked at his side, full of vigor and arrogance. When he looked at the Turks, there was a hint of disdain and hostility in his eyes, even though he had come to request the Turks to send troops to fight alongside him. This was in line with the attitude of the soldiers of the Tang dynasty toward the Turks, and it showed that he was confident. "All right, don't ask me to paint a big cake. All of you are like starving wolves." The moment Yang Fan and Ma Xiao left, Moshe slapped the table in displeasure. The Khitans sent an envoy, saying that they defeated the Zhou army and chased the Zhou army like wolves and boars. They need us to send troops to settle the situation in one battle and completely separate the Hebei province from the Zhou kingdom's territory. On the other hand, Li Duozuo's envoy said that they have already defeated the Khitans and surrounded the remaining Khitans. Even Li Jinzhong died in Ma City. Who is telling the truth? Moshe's question immediately awakened everyone from the beautiful vision that Yang Fan had created for them. Su Mumu said, "Khan, why don't you summon the Khitan envoy, and we will know the truth?" Yes. Khan, summon the Khitan envoy, and we will know who is the truth and who is fake. At this point, Moshe could not interrogate the Khitans alone and make the leaders feel that he did not trust them. He could only order his men to bring the Khitan envoy. Inside a tent sat a burly man with messy hair and messy scalp. He sat on a wolfskin mattress, and in front of him was a small stove. On the stove was a small pot, and the mutton in the pot was boiling with a strong aroma. The burly man held a dark red wine gourd in one hand and a knife in the other. He used the knife to cut the boiling mutton out of the pot and blew on it to cool it down before chewing on the mutton and gulping down the wine. This man was called Stan, a shaman of the Khitans. He was the envoy sent by Sun Wanrong to the Turkic conference. He knew that today was the day that Moshe would gather all the tribes to discuss the deployment of troops, and was waiting for a reply. Even though the liquor worm made him drool, he restrained himself from getting drunk. As he was drinking, the curtain was lifted and the cold wind blew in with snowflakes. Stan's body was hot from eating in the tent, and he was not wearing much. He could not help but shiver. He raised his head and saw a Khitan guard standing at the entrance of the tent. The guard cupped his fists and said, "Shaman, Khan Moshe invites you." Stan's spirit was lifted, and he quickly plugged the cork of the wine gourd and hung it on his waist. He stood up and said, "Help me dress." The guards sent by Matsu to urge Stan to come had been waiting outside for a long time. Only then did they see several Khitan warriors walking slowly towards them, accompanied by their great shaman. Kirsten wore a colorful hat made of pheasant feathers, a white skull necklace made of ground cow bones, and a skirt made of crumpled leather was tied around his waist. He held an ebony staff with a ponytail in his hand, and his expression was unusually solemn. Stan followed the man to the Coggin's tent. The guards had been left outside while Stan was ushered into the tent by one of the guards. The moment Stan entered the tent, he swept his gaze around and saw that the tent was filled with the leaders of the various Turkic tribes, all of them staring at him. Stan bowed slightly and greeted Moshe, who was sitting on the main seat. "Stan greets Khan Moshe." Moshe said politely, "Shaman need not stand on ceremony. Sit." Immediately, someone led Stan to an empty seat at the side. It was the seat that Yang Fan sat on just now. However, the table had been cleaned. Stan sat down behind the table and calmly said to Moke, "The Khan has summoned me today. Has he made a decision on my request?" Moshe nodded and said, "After Shaman stated his intention, I have been thinking about this matter. Today I gathered all the leaders to discuss a decision. I think that since you want to cooperate with my tribe, the most important thing is to be honest with each other. What does Shaman think?" Stan's eyes flashed under his messy hair, and he said in a deep voice, "Of course." Moshe said expressionlessly, "Then I do not know the art of psychic. How does Shaman want me to form an alliance with the dead Li Jinzhong?" Chapter 753. Uzbekistan's expression changed. As Moshe spoke, everyone was already staring at the changes in his expression. When they saw this scene, they no longer doubted Yang Fan's words. Unfortunately, Uzbekistan was in a state of panic and had no time to consider where the Turks had heard this news. He still wanted to salvage the situation and hurriedly explained, "This is really a bad joke. This shaman was sent out on the orders of our Kogin. Before this, our Kogin had just led his troops out of Yuzhou and attacked Danzhou. I wonder where the Kogin heard this rumor." Maji sipped his wine and lightly said, "You lost the battle in Ma City?" Uzbekistan was stunned again. Only now did he start to feel that the other party was not just groundless speculation, but had actually understood something. He quickly put on a calm expression and said, "Victory and defeat are common in war. Occasionally losing is a very normal thing. The Kogin is a hero on horseback and has been on the battlefield for half his life. He should understand this." Mooch laughed heartily and said, "So you have won?" Uzbekistan calmly said, "We only suffered a setback in attacking the city, a small defeat." Xiao Mumu could not hold back and angrily shouted, "Even your Kogin, Li Jinzhong, died in this battle, and you still say it was a small defeat?" Uzbekistan was dumbfounded and retorted in surprise, "Who said that our Kogin died in this battle?" Maji sneered, "You dare say that Li Jinzhong is still alive?" Uzbekistan's mind raced, and he knew that he could no longer hide it. He could only bite the bullet and say, "The Supreme Kogin has indeed passed away." "But," Mun said in a carefree tone, "you finally admitted it." "Humph. As the Kogin, there's no reason for him to personally attack a city, right? He died in the middle of the army, and you dare say that this battle was a small defeat?" Uzbekistan panicked and quickly defended himself. "Although our Kogin has passed away, he did not die in Ma City." Seljuk pressed on, "Then where did he die?" Uzbekistan stammered, "Our Kogin was shot by an arrow in the Yellow Deer Valley. Due to the poor treatment, he suffered a relapse from time to time. Later on, when attacking Zhuolu, his old injuries relapsed and he died." The Turkic leaders in the tent seemed to have heard a big joke, and all burst into laughter. Poor Grand Wizard Kirstein looked at their behavior blankly, not knowing what to say for a moment. His initial concealment of Li Jinzhong's death and his subsequent string of quibbles had made it so that no one would believe his words. In the face of the Turk's reaction, he truly didn't know what to do. Mochibe's face darkened. "How dare you? You suffered a defeat in Ma City, and even Li Jinzhong died on the spot. After that, you were surrounded by the Zhou army and were in a dilemma of life and death. So you want to use this Khan as a spear, huh? On one hand, you sent messengers to the Zhou kingdom to see their emperor, begging for her forgiveness. And on the other hand, sent you to deceive this Khan into sending troops. You say that you have already defeated Wang Xiaoji's army of 1 million, and the Tangs are terrified at the news. It's just that you are limited by your military strength and cannot conquer Yuzhou for a long time. Humph! If this Khan falls for your evil scheme and sends troops into Hebei, then I will be helping you out of the siege. This Khan will suffer heavy casualties, so how can I get any benefits? If you surrender to the Zhou kingdom first, when this Khan's troops arrive, I'm afraid that you will still have to turn around and fight with us on behalf of the Zhou kingdom to atone for your sins, right? Grand Wizard Kirstein, do you think the Turks are so easy to bully? Kirstein first drank some wine and then dressed up to see Mochiba. The tent was hot, and in his anxiety he was sweating profusely. He said repeatedly, "It's not like that, it's really not like that. The Zhou army has suffered repeated defeats and can't do anything to us. Although Khan Li Jinzhong is dead, he did not die on the battlefield. Moreover, our troops have not been surrounded by the Zhou army at all. Who exactly is the slanderer? Khan, you must investigate clearly." Chabikri shouted, "This person is deceiving the people and deceiving the Khan. Kill him. Yes, kill him." In the eyes of the leaders, Kirstein was sweating profusely. They automatically interpreted it as a sign of guilt after the lie was exposed, and the leaders began to clamor. Mochiba waved his hand and stopped the shouting. He said to Kirstein, "You still don't admit it? The Zhou kingdom has also sent an envoy to urge this Khan to send troops and cooperate with the Zhou kingdom to suppress you. All of this is what their envoy said. Otherwise, this Khan will be kept in the dark by you." Kirstein said anxiously, "Khan, they are lying to you. I am willing to confront them face to face." Mochiba ignored Kirstein's exasperated explanation and said coldly, "We will talk about this later." Kirstein shouted, "Khan, Khan, speed is of the essence in war. If we do not send troops now and wait for the Zhou kingdom to calmly dispatch reinforcements from the rear, we will miss the opportunity." Mochiba said, "Take him away." 2 Turkic warriors rushed into the tent and dragged Grand Wizard Kirstein away. As Stan struggled, he shouted in despair, "Let me confront them. Let me confront them face to face." Kirstein's voice became further and further away, and the tent became quiet again. Xiaomu asked, "Khan, what should we do now?" Mochiba stood up and slowly paced a few steps in the tent. He said in a deep voice, "Leave them alone for a few days. Chabikri, your tribe is located in the northeast. Quickly send an order back and send people to infiltrate Hebei to gather information." Chabikri immediately cupped his fists and replied, "Yes, sir." He then rushed out of the tent to make the arrangements. Mochiba forced himself to be alert and smiled. "We cannot let go of this good opportunity. We must send troops, and we must reap the benefits. The only difference is who to help. All tribes must continue to make preparations. Once we have a grasp of the situation in Hebei, we will immediately send troops." All the leaders agreed loudly. When Yang Fan went to the Turkic Khaganate, he thought that as long as he defeated the Khitan envoy, he would be able to retreat. He did not expect Mochiba to be cunning and cautious like an old fox. Therefore, he had no choice but to temporarily stay in the Turkic Khaganate and temporarily become a nomad. The next day, after the snow stopped, the Turkic Khaganate actually wanted to move to a new winter camp, which is a pastoral area. Yang Fan originally thought that the herdsmen took advantage of the autumn to cut enough grass and pile it up to feed their livestock in the winter, just like the people in the Han settlements. However, the main means of production for the nomadic tribes was their livestock. They had too many livestock, and it was impossible to rely on manpower to accumulate enough food and grass for them. Therefore, many tribes had to switch to grazing in the winter. The grass here had almost been eaten up by their livestock, so they had to move to another pastoral area soon. There was very little water there, and they had to pass through several Gobi regions. There was nothing but sand and stones along the way, so they had a lot of things to prepare. Early in the morning, the Turkic Khaganate started to make preparations. They have been preparing for a full half a month. At this time, they are only doing the final preparations before the migration. The whole tribe is busy, and Yang Fan, Ma Chiao, Gu Zhuting, and the rest are standing there watching the bustle. Loading the carts, loading the camels, driving the horses, gathering the sheep, loading the firewood and grass, which are the fuel for the journey and food for the livestock, followed by packing the snow and ice, which are the drinking water for the journey. Yang Fan can't help but glance worriedly at Gu Zhuting. Along the way, this clean lady might not be able to bathe as extravagantly as she did last night. The vanguard has already set off. Their mission is to set up the tents before the main group arrives at the campsite for the night. The camels, sheep, horses, and cows will slowly follow behind the vanguard. At this moment, a group of people suddenly charge towards Yang Fan and the rest who are watching the Turkic Khaganate. Gu Zhuting whispered into Yang Fan's ears, "Someone is coming. They seem to be the Khitans." Yang Fan smiled as he looked at the large flock of sheep and replied calmly, "I noticed them. Ignore them." "You despicable Zhou people. You tried to deceive the Moke Khaganate with your flowery words. You cowards. If you have the guts, fight us with real swords and spears." Great Shaman Kirsten is so angry that he can't choose his words. His mouth is full of shouts in the Khitan language that Yang Fan can't understand. Leading a group of Khitan guards, he charged over aggressively. The Turks who are preparing to change the battlefield noticed the commotion and stopped to watch. Seeing that the two parties preparing to fight are not their tribesmen, they became interested in watching. Yang Fan smiled and turned back to Ma Chiao. "Have your skills been improving over the years?" Ma Chiao stared at him and said proudly, "Do you want to have a spar? I think I'm even better than you were in the past." Yang Fan said with a smile, "All right then. You go. I don't care about the casualties. I only want speed. I want to see how long you can take to defeat them. Don't let that guy with the pheasant feather on his head die. I think he is the leader." Ma Chiao said excitedly, "Good. Watch me." After Ma Chiao finished, he unsheathed his sword and charged towards the Khitan people. Yang Fan said to Gu Zhuting, who was on the other side, "You take care of them." Gu Zhuting nodded her head and floated forward, following behind Ma Chiao. She did not unsheath her sword and only moved along with Ma Chiao. Once a Khitan weapon broke through Ma Chiao's defense and reached his side, she unsheathed her sword and accurately tapped it to deflect the enemy's weapon. After that, she sheathed her sword and followed behind Ma Chiao. With someone protecting him, Ma Chiao can attack without any hesitation. In this kind of fight, he used the fighting techniques of the pugilistic world. In a battlefield with thousands of soldiers and horses, this kind of martial arts is not very useful. Although compared to ordinary soldiers, this kind of fighting technique can make the user stronger, it is not a fundamental method. However, in this kind of situation, fighting a dozen Khitan people will increase his power greatly. Ma Chiao's sword whizzed around, as if it was wrapped around his body. From time to time, there will be a flash of blood. Yang Fan is beating the rhythm for him from behind. When he counted to 29, more than a dozen Khitan people have fallen to the ground, either dead or injured. Only Grand Shaman Kirsten is left. Gu Zhuting watched excitedly. She unsheathed her sword, and with a flick of her sword, the pheasant feathers on Grand Shaman Kirsten's head were cut into pieces and fell down. At this moment, the Turks who had watched enough rushed forward to pull the Khitan people away. Many Turks cheered loudly for Yang Fan and the rest, praising their bravery. Many martial men gave Ma Chiao a thumbs up. Ma Chiao wiped the bloody sword on the clothes of a Khitan person, then sheathed the sword and walked back proudly. "I curse you! I curse you!" Grand Shaman Kirsten, who was only proficient in Khitan and Turkic languages and stuttered in Chinese, cursed angrily. In the distance, on a spacious carriage pulled by 8 oxen, Machi watched this scene coldly. His in-law, Muan, who was sitting beside him, said, "If the Khitans really have the upper hand in Hebei, they shouldn't be so impatient. It seems that the situation in Hebei is really disadvantageous to them. Moshe gently put down the curtain and replied indifferently, "Let's wait for news from Chebekli first." Chapter 754. In less than half a day, the migrating tribe walked out of the snowfield and entered a sandy highland. In front of them were endless hills. The undulating land was empty, and the sheep were crowded together, bleating nonstop, which added some vitality to the boring journey. The herd of oxen moved slowly. From time to time, they would squeeze into the herd of horses. Apparently, the horses didn't want to mingle with these slow-witted animals. The ponies kicked their hind legs and ran away. The wrangler madly urged his horse to chase after them. The wrangler's whip cracked loudly, and the disobedient ponies were blown back. The camel was the most undisciplined animal in the procession. When it saw a bunch of hay as thick as a finger sticking out of the gravel, it would stop to chew and swallow it slowly. No matter how hard you chased it, it would not budge, so the procession became longer and longer. Yongfan's group was not far from the Khitan group. They were separated by a row of chariots. Along the way, the Khitan people stared at them with resentment, but they did not rush over to fight again. More than 10 of them were defeated by 1.5 people, which was really embarrassing. How could they have the courage to go forward and fight again? Yongfan was riding a camel, probably a camel. It was tall, with 2 humps on the front and the back. The soft leather mattress in the middle made him sit comfortably. Ma Chao was riding an old horse next to Yongfan. For some reason, the camel under Yongfan liked the dog fur hat on Ma Chao's head. From time to time, it would twist its neck and bite Ma Chao's head, making Ma Chao cover his hat to avoid it. Gu Zhuting, who was walking on the other side of Yongfan, was also riding a camel. She was much more experienced in the desert than Yongfan and Ma Chao. When she heard that they were going to change places, she armed herself with all the things that could keep her warm. Because she was wearing too thick clothes, her neck was stuck. She could only stand straight and could not even nod or shake her head. If she wanted to turn around to see what was going on behind her, she had to turn her whole body around. However, she was the warmest one in the group. Along the way, Yongfan and Ma Chao's faces were a little blue, but she still looked as usual. The clouds changed shapes in the sky, but they were always white. The cliffs under their feet kept changing, but they were always the same stones and sand. The initially vast and shocking feeling of the wilderness gradually disappeared, leaving only a feeling of dullness, endless dullness. They just wanted to fall asleep. The Khitan people's eyes that stared at Yongfan and the others also became powerless. The day's journey ended in boredom. There were many temporary, triangular yurts in front of them. Yongfan looked at the sunset in the sky and was surprised by the judgment of the herdsmen on the grassland. The herdsmen in the front rode fast on their horses and could accurately estimate the distance that a large group of people could cover in a day. When the herders saw the camp, they immediately cheered. They rushed into the camp excitedly and began to untie the camels, unpack the parcels, set up the stove, let out some fresh air, and solve their personal problems. The stove was soon lit, and the tin basin was put on the fire. After the bumpy journey, the basin was full of dust, dead branches, and cow hair. Yongfan was very curious about what these herders were going to use to clean it, but they did not wash it at all. They directly poured snow and ice into it. Large pieces of snow and ice were put into the pot and began to melt into water. Many people who were too thirsty did not wait for the snow and ice to completely melt. They grabbed a piece and put it in their mouth. Because the weather was too cold, the water in their water bags had long been frozen into ice. They could only drink water when the fire was lit. The people behind arrived one after another. Seeing the smoke rising from the camp, they sang happily, praising the greatness of the gods who protected them, gave them food, and let them survive. If one did not consider their savagery when invading other tribes, Yongfan actually admired their optimistic spirit and tenacious will to survive in such a harsh environment. A group of people came and stopped in front of the yurts of Yongfan and the others. It seemed that they were going to set up camp here. From their clothes and the bright camels and horses, they seemed to be a noble, Turkic family. Yang Fan did not pay them any mind. He only gave them a casual glance before looking elsewhere. Ah! Ma Chiao, who had been staring at the uncooked mutton for a long time and wiping his mouth, walked back to Yang Fan's side, suddenly let out a strange cry. Yang Fan, who had just thought of 2 lines of a poem to satisfy his craving as a poet at the frontier fortress, was startled and instantly forgot the poem that was on the tip of his tongue. Yang Fan glared at him unhappily and said, "You are already a father. Do you need to be surprised?" Ma Chiao pointed to a person in the distance and was tongue-tied. Yang Fan subconsciously turned his head and saw Gu Zhuting standing on the sand dune with a surprised expression. Then, Yang Fan's expression also froze. He saw himself and another Yang Fan not far away. Yang Fan was wearing a fat fur coat and was kicking off the felt tube on his feet. The felt tube was fat and round and could not be worn when walking. However, when riding on a horse, wearing it could be a good way to keep warm and prevent the lower limbs from freezing. Soon, the horror on Gu Zhuting and Ma Chiao's faces turned into surprise. They had already discovered the difference between the 2 Yang Fan. That Yang Fan was fatter than the Yang Fan they knew, and his face was also older. The real Yang Fan was still a heroic young man, but that person's face was already a little bloated. Most importantly, that Yang Fan had a green beard under his chin. The beard was not long, but extended from his chin to his temples. Yang Fan was less than 28 years old and had not grown a beard. Even if he did have a beard, it would not be as thick as this person's. Musi! Yang Fan, who had once pretended to be him, immediately recognized who this person was. In the Turks and the Tibetans, he had used his similar appearance to Musi to sow discord. On the Turks' side, he had forced the newly ascended Moshe to withdraw his 100,000 troops that were advancing on Lingwu. More than 20,000 of his men were killed by the Tang army, and Moshe had to expend a great deal of effort to unify the Turkic tribes. And on the Tibetan side, his actions did not seem to have much effect, but the consequences had continued to this day. The Tibetans did not interfere much with the Tang's recovery of the 4 garrisons of Anchi because their internal struggles for power were getting more and more serious, and they were in constant internal strife. It was also for this reason that the Tibetans did not take advantage of the situation. And the reason why Yang Fan was able to do all this was because he looked exactly like Musi and could pass off the fake as the real one. Who would have thought that he would meet this person again today? However, in just a few years, Ashina Musi had undergone a great change. At a glance, he looked exactly the same as Yang Fan, but he could no longer withstand a detailed comparison. It was impossible for the current Yang Fan to pretend to be him. Musi kicked off the blanket, and immediately a slave ran over and eagerly picked it up for him. Musi took out a wine pouch from his bosom, drank a few mouthfuls like a drunkard, and hurriedly put it back. He turned to a carriage, opened the door, and helped a woman out. At this time, a gentle smile appeared on his face, a smile that only a man would have when facing a woman. A woman slowly walked out of the carriage. The moment Yang Fan saw her, his gaze froze, and then he subconsciously avoided her, only glancing at them out of the corner of his eyes. The woman was wearing a Turkic-style robe. Because she had been in the carriage all the way, she did not wear too much. Her slender waist was tightly bound by a wide belt, and her pair of tight and slender legs were wrapped by long leather boots under the robe. It was still possible to see her slim waist and slender legs, which were unusually graceful. She wore a warm hat on her head, with a circle of white fox fur on the brim, which set off her beautiful face like a beautiful white lotus. Compared to her former self, there was less unruly wildness in her demeanor, and more charm of a mature woman. It was really her, Mu Hiue. This young woman in her 20s still had delicate and lovely facial features, and her pink lips still revealed a beautiful and attractive curve. Because of the exhaustion caused by the long journey, she looked a little lazy. She seemed to know that her husband was secretly drinking, and with a coquettish look, she seemed to say something to him. Mu Si did not speak, but only grinned. Mu Hua rolled her eyes at him again, and turned around to carry a child from the carriage. The child was at the age of learning to walk, and as soon as he was carried out of the carriage, he struggled to get off the ground. Mu Hua had to put him on the ground and held his hand. The little guy stubbornly took a moonwalk, wanting to take a walk. Seeing this, Mu Si could only helplessly smile, and lovingly pinched his son's cheek. After giving a few words to his wife, she bent down and entered the low tent. This was a simple tent for temporary accommodation during the transition. Even though he was the Khan's son and the son-in-law of the Mun Kingdom's great Yabgu, his tent was not much bigger than others. At most, it was a little cleaner, and the fur used for the bedding was a little more expensive. Seeing that Mu Si was using hand gestures to help her speak, Yang Fan knew that his throat injury had not healed. The current Mu Si had long lost his high spirits, and this had a lot to do with it, because of his throat injury and the fact that his brothers were all strong competitors. He must have lost the chance to compete for the throne. Even because of his throat injury, and because he could not speak clearly, it had become an extravagant hope for him to lead an army to war. That was why he appeared here and lived in the Khan tribe. But it was really hard to say whether it was a blessing or a curse. Yang Fan felt that he had lost the right to participate in the struggle for the throne. He did not need to be involved in the power struggle, nor did he need to fight on the battlefield. He could live with his wife and son for a long time and enjoy the happiness of a family. It was not necessarily a bad thing. The little guy was probably bored to death in the carriage, so he was in high spirits and was not afraid of the cold. He hobbled away, looking around at the bustling camp and walking in the direction where Yang Fan was. Yang Fan smiled, turned around, and walked towards the yurt. Ma Chiao chased after him and whispered, "Hey, did you see that? That person looks so much like you. If you weren't standing beside me, I would have recognized the wrong person." Gu Zhuting looked at Yang Fan's hurried back, and her slender eyes slightly narrowed. From Yang Fan's unnatural behavior, she felt that there must be a story behind it. But this was obviously not a suitable place to inquire about other people's secrets, and that person's secrets were not suitable for her to inquire about. Gu Zhuting sighed regretfully and suppressed her desire for gossip. Chapter 755. It was late at night, and the clamor of dusk had completely quieted down. Outside the tent, the northern wind was howling. Other than the necessary sentries, everyone was curled up in their tents. Ma Chiao was really a glutton. The naturally thawed milk in the tent had not completely melted. He had eaten so much beef and mutton that night. At this time, he was still holding a jar of frozen milk. He used a knife to scrape it layer by layer and put it into his mouth, eating it with relish. This kind of temporary tent was too small. If a person slept in such a small space, they would touch the side of the tent. However, there were not many tents, and at least 3 people slept in each tent. Gu Zhuting was a man dressed as a woman. No matter which tent she slept in, she could not avoid being squeezed with 2 stinky men. Among the many stinky men, probably only Yang Fan was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, she consciously squeezed into the same tent as Yang Fan and Ma Chiao. Ma Chiao kept eating, while Yang Fan and Gu Zhuting sat cross-legged. They wanted to talk, but they could not find a topic to talk about. They felt uncomfortable not talking. The tent was especially quiet. Other than the howling wind, there was only the sound of Ma Chiao licking the milk. Slurp, slurp! This sound seemed to have a hypnotic effect. Yang Fan and Gu Zhuting sat on the side, their heads directly touching the roof. After sitting for a while, Yang Fan could not bear it anymore. He yawned and said, "Let's sleep." Gu Zhuting immediately lay down with her back pressed against the tent. Yang Fan suggested, "You should sleep in the middle. It's colder on the side." Gu Zhuting was shocked. She quickly shook her head at him and quickly glanced at Ma Chiao. It seemed that she was not willing to sleep next to Ma Chiao. Ma Chao did not give up. He stuck out his tongue and licked the milk on the knife. He said with satisfaction, "Then I'll lie in the middle." Ma Chao closed the lid of the milk can and happily lay down in the middle of the tent. There was still a smear of milk at the corner of his mouth. Yang Fan and Gu Zhuding looked at each other, turned around at the same time and lay down. Everyone was wearing thick clothes, which could not be taken off in the tent, so it was fine even if they were pressed against each other. It was just that the air in the narrow space was stuffy, and it was difficult to turn around, which was very uncomfortable. Just as Yang Fan was about to fall asleep, Ma Chiao's snoring suddenly rang out in the tent. The snoring was not soft, and it was deafening to his ears. Yang Fan could not help but sigh. "I really can't sleep anymore. No matter what, I have to kick Chiao Gu aside tomorrow." Yang Fan couldn't fall asleep because of Ma Chiao's snoring, so he gently lay down and used his arm as a pillow to think. Do I snore on a regular basis? Men should be snoring, but it was a pity that he couldn't hear it. If I snore as loudly as Chiao Gu, how did Xiao Man sleep in the past? When I woke up in the morning, she was clearly sound asleep. Is it okay for a woman to listen to a man snoring? In that case, Miss Gu should be able to sleep. Before this mission, the military station has already sent news back to Luoyang. My family should already know that I am safe. Nianzhu and Serong are growing the fastest, and I have been away for half a year. When I go back, there should be a lot of changes. Maybe they will even call me father. Yang Fan's thoughts were in a mess, and he thought a lot in this tent in the desert. Suddenly, he would also think of Mu-Hu in another yurt not far away. The two of them had such a scene because of an unsolvable misunderstanding. But because of this skin contact, he could not help but think of her. Now, seeing her husband love her so much, seeing that she had a lovely child, and seeing that she had grown into a happy woman, the worry that should not have been on his mind disappeared. The tent was full of snoring. The snoring suddenly stopped, and Ma Chiao suddenly sat up. Yang Fan, curiously, pricked up his ears. He felt that Ma Chiao sat for a moment, then suddenly moved to the side of the tent, and then pushed aside the layers of yurts on the triangular tent and crawled out. As soon as Ma Chiao went out, Gu Zhuding, who Yang Fan thought was already asleep, crawled in front of him like a kitten and said firmly, "You sleep on my side or I can't sleep. It's so cold." As soon as Ma Chiao went out, he shivered. The wind blowing on his face was like a knife cutting. The desert night was so cold that he was not even willing to stretch out his toes. The vast Milky Way was gorgeous in the sky, and in the tranquility and serenity there was a glimmer of light. With the help of this faint light, Ma Chiao stumbled into the distance. After waking up for the night, Ma Chiao ran back, wrapped in a gust of cold air, and entered the tent. Being suffocated by the warm air in the tent, he first shivered, and then hurriedly covered the entrance of the tent before groping his way back to the bed. As soon as he reached out, he felt a pair of big feet covered in yurts, and the middle space was already occupied by Yang Fan. "You're not obedient in your sleep," Ma Chiao muttered, and then felt his way to the side. After confirming that there was an empty space, he crawled over and covered himself with a thick sheepskin coat. Not long after, the sweet sleepiness made him snore again. Yang Fan let out a sigh of relief, and then he felt that Miss Gu, who was sleeping beside him, seemed to also let out a long sigh of relief. The sky had just brightened, and the sleepiness was thick when the sound of preparing to set off rang out in the camp. Yang Fan opened his eyes and did not see Gu Zhuding beside him. He thought that she had woken up earlier than him, and then he felt a little heavy. He gently lifted the wool blanket and saw that Gu Zhuding had already burrowed her whole body into his arms, and her head was also buried in the quilt. She was even using his fat sleeves to cover her ears, sleeping peacefully, like a chick under the wings of a hen. The breakfast was very sloppy, and the shepherds did not even cook. They only boiled some dirty hot water, and everyone ate some dry food and dried meat with the hot water. Then they began to dismantle the tents Pack up and load the camels." Gu Zhuting had been avoiding Yang Fan's gaze, as if she was a little embarrassed about what had happened in the morning. Yang Fan did not think that there was anything wrong with that, but for Gu Zhuting, who had already matured physically and mentally, but had never had such intimate actions with a man before, it would obviously take more time for the waves in her heart to calm down. The procession continued to move forward in the boundless dawn. In the east, there was a vast expanse of bright red that burned half the sky, making the wilderness look even more desolate. After several days of traveling, Yang Fan could no longer see the banner of Moshe's content, and then he could no longer see Musi and Muhu's family. Soon after, he could not even see the grand shaman Kirsten, who glared at them every day and tried to kill them with his eyes. The procession grew even longer, stretching for dozens of li, but there was no one to restrain or watch over these envoys from Wuzhou and Khitan. It was impossible for them to escape, for if they did, they would be seeking their own deaths. The wilderness was the best guard for the Turks. The endless wilderness made their lives hard, but it was also the most powerful army that the heavens had given them. Even when they were at their weakest, no powerful empire dared to say that they could truly conquer them living in the desert grasslands. Their frequent wars were far more frequent than those in the Central Plains, and most of them were civil wars over limited water sources and grasslands. The firewood and ice they had stored before they set off had been used up. Now they burned horse and sheep dung every day and drank the thin layer of snow scraped from the Gobi Desert, which contained not only gravel but also cow and horse dung. But they could not survive without drinking, and Yang Fan was no exception. Although Miss Gu was a woman, she had probably experienced far more difficult conditions than Yang Fan, so she adapted earlier than him. Of course, it was impossible for them to take a bath, but washing their hair was also out of the question. Yang Fan, Ma Qiao, Gu Zhuting, and the others all had messy and dirty hair, and their leather robes were stained with the smell of sheep. Under these conditions, no matter how beautiful a woman was, it was impossible for them to have any romantic thoughts while holding her in their arms. Now, Yang Fan had adapted to Ma Qiao's snoring, and Gu Zhuting had also gotten used to sleeping in Yang Fan's arms, pressing against his chest for warmth and covering her ears with his sleeves to avoid Ma Qiao's snoring. The winter was far longer than in the Central Plains, and the land was barren, so these herdsmen abided by the laws of nature and migrated year after year, moving once every half a month on average. This time they traveled for 12 days and arrived at their new home. Their new home was a winter pasture, covered in endless yellow sand and speckled with white snow. A depression in the sand dunes that was prepared for their camp was pitch black, formed from the accumulation of cow and sheep dung in previous years. This was where the camp was to be set up. This dung would serve as fuel for the herdsmen while they were stationed here, and it was also the building material that they used to build walls to ward off the cold in this barren land devoid of trees, mud, or even rocks. It was also the geothermal energy that they used to keep their livestock warm. In this frigid place, it was a miraculous substance that could continuously radiate heat without the need for fire. The Khan of Mushio led them to live in a pile of sheep dung. Our migration took 12 days. While the Turks were busy constructing the camp that they were going to live in for at least half a month, Yang Fan, Ma Qiao, and Gu Zhuting slowly walked to a sand dune. In front of them was a vast expanse of flat land, and there was nothing between the heavens and the earth. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Ma Qiao, who had good teeth and a good appetite, bit on a piece of frozen meat and puffed out puffs of white smoke. Yang Fan said, "This is Mushio's Khan tribe. We do not know where the other tribes are headed. Mushio's Khan tribe is migrating to the east, and they should have more than one winter pasture. The best pasture should be in the south. To the east, it seems like he is ready to send troops." Ma Qiao said with a crunch, "It is true that they are sending troops, but it is hard to say whether they are helping the Khitans or us." Yang Fan nodded and said, "That's right. Mushio must have asked the Khitans and is uncertain. So he sent his men to Hebei to investigate the situation." Gu Zhuting asked worriedly, "Is there any problem with the arrangements over there?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "The Chitons are roaming all over the place. Although they are powerful, Hebei is still under the control of the imperial court. Even we are unable to grasp their exact whereabouts. So what can the scouts of the Turks find out? Since Mushio is not in a hurry to make a decision, I know that our chances of success have increased." Gu Zhuting said, "Can't we do anything now?" Yang Fan said, "What can we do? We can only wait. Maybe when Mushio arrives, I should meet him to express my dissatisfaction and ask him to send us back." Gu Zhuting smiled knowingly. "Good idea. Doing so is befitting of a person who has already gained the upper hand." Ma Chiao suddenly pointed and said, "Look, there's a patch of snow in that shady place, and it looks quite thick." Gu Zhuting rolled her eyes at him and said, "What's there to be surprised about?" Ma Chiao looked at her strangely and said, "Didn't you always complain that you can't bathe? If you wait any longer, the snow will be swept away by the shepherds." Gu Zhuting let out a strange cry and finally remembered how embarrassing she looked at this moment. She immediately turned around and ran, muttering, "Shovel bag!" Yang Fan and Ma Chiao laughed behind her. Chapter 756. Thousands of yurts and tens of thousands of shepherds. Just setting up camp took 2.5 days. On the afternoon of the third day, Moshe's Khan tent finally arrived. The huge Khan tent was only completed in the evening. When the Khan's flag was raised, the sky had already turned dark. The people inside and outside were still busy. A large bed filled with velvet was set up in the Khan's tent, and a stove was built next to it for heating. The Khan's many wives were also directing the slaves to arrange everything in their own tents. The Khan tent was divided into 2 parts. The front part was used as a meeting hall. This part had already been completed, whether it was the external setup or the internal construction. 2/3 of the Khan tent was buried underground and a large pit was dug. In order to prevent the soft sand walls from collapsing, a layer of sheep dung was spread around and on the ground. Other than fixing the walls, it could also greatly raise the temperature inside the tent. After all this was done, the Khan tent was set up. Tapestries were hung around it for both decoration and warmth. The ground was covered with soft wool blankets. The Khan tent was only exposed to the height of a person, and the top of the tent was also covered with sheep dung. Therefore, when one entered the tent, it was like a different world from the cold outside. It was as warm as spring. Moshe was wearing a soft robe and sat cross-legged in front of the table. Mu-En, Zhu-Tu, Chebakri, Su-Mu, and several other important leaders had rushed over from their tribes and sat on his left and right. Crash! There was the sound of shattering utensils coming from the back of the tent, and then there was a whistling sound of whipping and painful pleas. Kadun whipped, cursed, and roared. A clumsy slave had broken her things, and from the way she cursed, it should have been her chamber pot that was broken. Moshe was not affected at all. He had long been used to focusing on his own matters in all kinds of noisy and chaotic environments. Chebakri brought his scouts. Ever since he received Khan Moshe's order, he sent people to infiltrate the Hebei province as quickly as possible. After I arrived at Hebei province, I carefully investigated for a long time. All the cities that I passed through were very peaceful. All the city gates were open and closed as usual. They did not close the city gates or forbid anyone from entering or leaving. However, to guard against the Khitan spies, they strengthened the interrogation and inspection. Fortunately, I speak fluent Chinese and I have a pass that I bought from the border army at a high price, so I did not arouse their suspicion. Momochi was not in the mood to listen to his hardships and risks. Interrupting him, he asked, "Is there any news of the Khitans?" The scout said, "Everybody in Hebei knows about Li Jinzhong's death. Even a child playing on the street, if you ask him, he will know that Li Jinzhong died under Great General Li Duozuo's hand. He was killed by an arrow in the Battle of Horse City. The Khitans were indeed defeated in Ma City. It was said that more than 30,000 of them died." Machi raised an eyebrow and said, "Rumor." The scout smiled bitterly. Yes, it is impossible for me to pass through the layers of defense to reach Horse City. I did hear it from someone else, but I passed through 3 cities in a row, and the people in the cities all said the same thing. In addition, I also saw a large number of Khitan captives in 2 of the cities. There are at least 6,000 to 7,000 people in total. Mu-En stroked his beard and muttered, "The Khitans are brave, and they are all cavalry. It is not easy to capture them alive. Furthermore, they have defeated the Zhou army twice. The hatred between the 2 sides is as deep as the sea. Once they win, the Zhou army will not take captives. Killing captives is a very normal thing. Under such circumstances, if there are 6,000 to 7,000 captives, then it is believable that more than half of them have died." Momochi nodded and lowered his gaze to ponder for a moment. He then raised his eyes and asked, "You said if we need to pass through layers of defense to go to Horse City, what is going on?" The scout said, "I pretended to be a blacksmith and wanted to hire people to do business at 1,000 Gold smelting factory. In the end, the carriages and horses told me that it is impossible to pass through now. The Zhou army has already set up layers of defense and surrounded the Khitans. I was worried and specially tried. In the end, I only walked for about 200 li to the east, and it was difficult to advance any further. Even with the pass-through in hand, it was impossible. I had an idea and bought some wine and food to treat the officer who set up the checkpoint. I asked him when he can do business at 1,000 Gold smelting factory. He told me that Wu Yui's northern army has already advanced to Mount Lulong and the front line of Stone City. Lu Shurda has advanced to the Yutian area. Sha Chizhongyi has stationed his troops at the front line of Yongnu and Huangzhou. He told me not to worry. The Khitans can be annihilated at any time. However, the weather is cold, so it is easy to defend. If we press forward, it is easy for the Khitans to take the opportunity to break through. Therefore, we can only advance steadily and steadily. The Khitans will definitely be destroyed before spring at the latest." Momochi clapped his hands 3 times and summoned a guard. He said in a deep voice, "Go to the back and tell the Khitans to quickly bring me the map of Hebei province that I have treasured." Listening to the cursing and whipping sounds behind him, Momochi frowned again. "Just execute that clumsy slave. Don't disturb this Khan's business." The guard hurriedly acknowledged and retreated. Wu Zhou's side basically did not have a map of the Turks. On average, their tribes would move once every half a month. There was no place for them to settle down, and there were no geographical landforms that could be used as landmarks. Even a map that was painstakingly drawn was not as useful as a half-baked guide. It was different for the Turks. To them, the mountains, roads, and cities of the Han were fixed and unchanged for thousands of years. Rivers rarely changed their routes. Only the maps of the Han territories were useful to them. Although their maps were as simple and crude as Li Duozue's, they clearly marked the mountains, rivers, and the names of the cities. The sheepskin map was quickly brought over. The cursing and whipping sounds also stopped. Spreading the map on the table, Momochi looked at it carefully and said, "Li Duozue should still be around Horse City and 1,000 Gold smelting factory. Wu Yui's army is at Stone City. Lu Shurda is at Yutian. Sha Chizhongyi's army is at Yongnu Huangzhou." When he spread out the map, Mu-En and the rest squeezed to his side to look at it. At this moment, Xiao Mumu stretched out his thick finger and circled the map, saying in a deep voice, "3 sides are heavily guarded, 1 side is the sea, and there are only lakes and mountains in the surroundings. There is not a single big city. The Khitans are trapped here." Seljuk said, "From the looks of it, the Khitan envoy lied. They want us to send our troops out of Hebei and use us to help them out." Momochi's expression was uncertain. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "There is also Wu Yizong. He has 100,000 troops under him. Where is he?" The scout replied, "Wu Yizong has stationed his troops at Huai and Zhuolu and Flying Fox." Momochi lowered his head and immediately found these places on the map. Because the last time he left Hebei, he split his troops to attack from Huai and Flying Fox, so he was especially familiar with these places. Momochi sneered, "The Tangs are worried about us. They have stationed 100,000 troops here to prevent us from taking advantage of the situation." 100,000 great Zhou troops. If they were fighting in the wilderness, Momochi would not be concerned. But if they were defending a city, it would be a headache. Although Wu Yizong was the pig-riding general and was famous for his escapism, if Wu Yizong received a death order from the great Zhou emperor that he was not allowed to retreat, then Momochi was not confident that he could take down the city with just 100,000 troops. Zhu Tu said, "On the other hand, it also means that they have enough troops to encircle the Khitans. So, Wu Yizong has placed these 100,000 troops here as a reserve force. They can resist our invasion to the west and send reinforcements to the east." Momochi nodded slowly. Seljuk asked impatiently, "Khan, then what should we do?" Momochi narrowed his eyes and said leisurely, "Tomorrow, summon the Khitan and Zhou envoys to my tent. All of you come too. We will discuss the deployment of troops." Ah! A shrill scream came from outside the tent. The poor wretch who broke the Turkic Empress urinal breathed his last in the cold wind. The next morning, when Yang Fan saw the banner of the Khan being raised, he immediately came to seek an audience. Momochi was having breakfast. When he heard that the Wu and Zhou envoys had come to seek an audience, he was surprised and hurriedly summoned Yang Fan. Yang Fan sternly reprimanded Momochi for delaying the implementation of his promise and complained about their poor food and accommodation. Finally, he insisted that Momochi immediately send men to escort them back to Hebei. They had had enough. Momochi said with a smile, "Don't be anxious. It takes time to deploy troops. Every time you people from the Central Plains mobilize your troops, it will take half a month at the fastest and 3 months to half a year at the slowest. Even though my warriors on the grasslands are less burdensome and do not require large amounts of supplies, we cannot leave just like that. I have been preparing for the past few days and can deploy my troops soon. Ha! I will summon the leaders of the various tribes here to discuss matters. They have all arrived on my orders. Why don't you listen in?" At this point, Momochi suddenly changed the topic. "That's right. The Khitans have also sent an envoy, and their words are quite different from yours. In a little while, there is no harm in having a confrontation. Otherwise, it will not be enough to convince my tribesmen to mobilize." As Momochi spoke, he stared unblinkingly at Yang Fan, observing the changes in his expression. Yang Fan's expression did not change as he bluntly said, "The Khan's probing is very meaningless. This time, when your tribe was moving around and looking for winter nests, a group of people came to provoke us like madmen. At that time, we knew that the Khitans had also sent people over. I believe that your subordinates would have reported this matter to you. What's true is true, and what's false is false. What's there to confront? The Khitans are vassals of our imperial court. They are traitors. The Khan has already formed an alliance with our imperial court, so he should kill the Khitan emissary to make his stand clear. He shouldn't let him confront us. They are not qualified. Also, regardless of whether the Khan decides to send troops or not, we plan to go back. Without your country, we can still destroy them. Although it will cost more money and food to trap them, we can still afford it. If the leaders of your country are not willing to send troops, then the Khan should not force them. Probing again and again is very boring." Momochi smiled wholeheartedly and said, No. Of course this Khan believes you. Otherwise, why would I agree to send troops? This Khan has already seen through the lies of the Khitans. In a while, when the leaders of the various tribes are gathered, I will explain this matter on your behalf. Ha. You haven't had breakfast yet, right? Come. Why don't you eat with this Khan? Momochi ordered someone to bring a breakfast similar to his for Yang Fan. With an unhappy expression, Yang Fan walked over reluctantly and sat down at the seat of honor.